On April 10, 1967, Cook County Sheriff's Officer Ralph Probst was fatally shot in his hometown Illinois residence, a crime that remains unsolved over half a century later. Before joining the Cook County Sheriff's Department, Probst worked as a chemical engineer. In 1964, he graduated from the police academy and was assigned to the Special Elite Tactical Squad, focusing on organized crime investigations. Known for his strict adherence to protocol, Probst earned respect among peers and inadvertently made powerful enemies, including notorious mobster Sam DiStefano. In January 1967, while guarding DiStefano in a hospital, Probst enforced strict security measures, prompting DiStefano to threaten his life, a threat that was not taken seriously. On the night of his slaying, Probst and his wife, Marlene, were watching the Academy Awards at home. Marlene fell asleep on the couch, but was abruptly awakened by the sound of an explosion and breaking glass. She observed a cloud of smoke near the television and discovered Ralph lying on the kitchen floor, having been shot once in the back of the head through the kitchen window. Despite immediate efforts to summon help, Probst perished as a result of his injuries. The investigation revealed that the bullet was fired from a recently manufactured .41 caliber Magnum, a rare weapon at the time, with only about 2,000 in circulation in the country. Despite this lead, authorities were unable to locate the weapon. Initial suspicions fell on Sam DiStefano due to his prior threat. However, he was incarcerated at the time of the slaying, and no evidence linked him to orchestrating the crime from prison. Investigators also scrutinized Marlene, puzzled by her account of seeing smoke inside the house and the presence of broken glass outside the window. Ballistic tests demonstrated that firing a shot from close range outside the window could produce smoke inside and cause glass to fall outward, corroborating Marlene's testimony. Marlene was eventually completely cleared of suspicion in her husband's slaying. Attention then turned to the possibility that Probst was independently investigating a vice ring, potentially making him a target. Days before his death, he was seen visiting the home of ex-convict Frank Calvisi, purportedly inquiring about neighborhood burglaries. Additionally, a man resembling Calvisi had visited a house for sale across the street from the Probst residence, expressing unusual interest in its floor plan relative to the Probst home. Although a neighbor initially identified Calvisi in a police lineup, he later recanted, possibly out of fear. Calvisi died in 1974 without being charged in connection with the slaying. Another theory suggested that the slaying might be linked to his knowledge of illegal operations involving organized crime figures. His partner believed that Probst had confidential information that posed a threat to certain individuals. Despite extensive investigations, including reviewing Probst's case files and personal records, no conclusive evidence was found to support this theory. That said, given his focus on organized crime investigations, this theory clearly can't be discounted. Over the years, the case has remained cold, with no arrests or definitive leads. Lamont Coleman, known professionally as Big L, was a prominent figure in the 1990s hip-hop scene, celebrated for his exceptional lyrical prowess and storytelling abilities. Born on May 30th, 1974, in Harlem, New York, he emerged from a neighborhood rich in musical innovation. Big L's journey into music began in his teenage years, when he started freestyling and battling in his Harlem neighborhood. His reputation as a formidable rapper grew, leading to his first professional appearances on other hip-hop artists' albums in '92 and '93. In 1993, Big L signed with Columbia Records, and 2 years later, he released his debut album, Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous. Also, for those who are unaware, the name is a wordplay on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, a TV show which purported to show off how famous people really lived. The album featured tracks like Put It On and MVP, which highlighted his intricate wordplay and vivid storytelling. Despite its critical acclaim, the album didn't achieve significant commercial success at the time, and sadly, this would be the only album released during his lifetime. In 1998, Big L founded his own independent label, Flamboyant Entertainment, aiming to have greater creative control over his music. Through this label, he released the single Ebonics, which put him back front and center when the song was praised as one of the top singles of the year by The Source, a hip-hop magazine. Tragically, Big L's life was cut short on February 15, 1999, when he was fatally shot in Harlem. He was struck multiple times in the head and chest in a drive-by near his home. The slaying sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community, leading to widespread speculation about the motive behind the killing. Some theories suggested that Big L was targeted due to associations with individuals involved in criminal activities, while others believed it was a case of mistaken identity. In May 1999, his childhood friend, Gerard Woodley, was arrested in connection with the slaying, but was later released due to insufficient evidence. Speculation has run rampant, with the most common theory suggesting that Big L's brother's criminal activities had something to do with the slaying. However, others have speculated that Woodley and Big L had a personal feud, and that Woodley retaliated by eliminating Big L. Despite the arrest of Woodley, he was never charged in relation to the crime, and Big L's death remains unsolved. On February 19, 1991, the body of an unidentified man, later referred to as the Inglewood John Doe, was discovered in an alley adjacent to a residential area. The victim, a white male estimated to be between 55 and 75 years old, was found lying in a dumpster, partially concealed by trash. He stood approximately 6 feet tall and weighed around 155 pounds. His hair was gray or partially gray, and he had a light brown mustache and brown eyes. Notably, he bore a possible surgical scar on his chest, a 9-inch scar on the right side of his back, and numerous moles on his abdomen. At the time of discovery, the man was dressed in a long-sleeved beige shirt layered over a navy blue t-shirt, blue jeans, black loafers, and black socks. He also wore a distinctive black belt featuring a white metal buckle adorned with 2 turquoise stones and 1 brown or red stone. Despite efforts by law enforcement and the community, the identity of the Inglewood John Doe remains unknown. The circumstances surrounding his death are equally mysterious, as the cause of death has not been publicly disclosed. Over the years, forensic artists have created reconstructions of the man's appearance in hopes of generating leads, but these attempts have yet to yield definitive results. The case of the Inglewood John Doe is one of several unidentified person cases in the area during that period. For instance, in 1994, the remains of a young boy were found in a storage unit in Inglewood. Although the boy was eventually identified in 2017, his name was withheld, and details surrounding his death remain scarce. Some have speculated that there's a connection between these cases, but in my view, there's absolutely nothing to indicate that's the case, aside from them being found in the same locale. Charles Morgan, known to his friends as Chuck, was a 39-year-old escrow agent living in Tucson, Arizona in the mid-1970s. He worked in real estate escrow, a role that put him in a unique position to handle large sums of money, perform title searches, and facilitate property transactions between buyers and sellers. His job also entailed interacting with financial institutions, lawyers, and many influential and wealthy people. On March 22, 1977, Charles Morgan left his home to take his daughters to school. However, he didn't return from this short trip as planned. According to his wife, Ruth, Chuck failed to pick his daughters up from school, which prompted immediate concern since this was totally out of character for him. No one could reach him, and it soon became evident that Chuck had vanished under puzzling circumstances. During this time, Ruth told authorities that her husband had hinted he was involved in some kind of top-secret government operation. Chuck had reportedly expressed fear for his life and the safety of his family. However, his statements were vague, leaving many unanswered questions about the reasons behind his apprehension. The fact that he had never gone off the grid before only heightened the sense of urgency in locating him. Ruth claimed she received a strange phone call from someone shortly after Chuck went missing. The anonymous female voice, according to Ruth, said something cryptic like, "Chuck is all right," before quickly hanging up. This odd phone call added to the case's mystery and planted the seed that perhaps Chuck was still alive and being held, or sheltered, somewhere. 3 days after disappearing, Chuck turned up at his family's house in a somewhat disoriented state. He was missing a shoe and appeared to have been roughed up. When he returned, Chuck was unable to speak. He indicated that someone had forcibly made him take a substance which made him temporarily mute. He wrote notes for his wife, indicating he had been kidnapped and tortured. During this ordeal, Chuck reportedly insisted that no one call the police, out of fear that it would put him and his family in even greater danger. He also claimed he had managed to escape from captors, but provided no explicit details regarding their identities. Chuck only said that a secret organization wanted him dead, implying that he had knowledge of illegal deals or possible witness testimony that implicated powerful individuals. Over the next few days, Ruth cared for him, and he slowly regained his capacity to speak. She tried to convince him to allow her to call the authorities, but his reluctance to involve law enforcement was firm. Chuck maintained he had to quote-unquote handle this on his own. Months passed, and Chuck continued to carry on with his life in a somewhat uneasy but routine manner. Then, on June 7, 1977, he disappeared again. On June 18, 1977, Chuck Morgan's body was discovered in the desert just outside of Tucson. Chuck had been eliminated with a bullet to the back of the head, execution style. He was wearing a bulletproof vest, which indicated he had clearly planned on being attacked. The weapon that had fired the lethal shot was found near him, but there were no discernible fingerprints on it. The county medical examiner's office declared the death a self-deletion. Yet the logistics of a bullet wound in the back of the head, the presence of a bulletproof vest, and the strangeness of the entire scenario cast considerable doubt on this theory. Further adding to the mystery, a $2 bill clipped to Chuck's underwear has become one of the most famous and confounding pieces of evidence. On the bill's front, 7 Spanish names were listed, each corresponding to letters A through G. Above these names was the inscription Ecclesiastes 12, with arrows pointing to numbers 1 through 8 within the bill's serial number. This references a Bible passage that contemplates mortality and the afterlife. The bill's reverse featured a crude map highlighting roads between Tucson and the Mexican border, specifically marking Robles Junction and Sasabe. These areas have been noted by the authorities as being notorious for smuggling activities. Additionally, the signers of the Declaration of Independence were numbered 1 through 7. The significance of these markings remains entirely speculative at this point. Inside his vehicle, they discovered handcuffs, extra ammo, and what appeared to be a cache of documents. The nature of these documents remains in dispute, but some investigators at the time thought it might pertain to large-scale money laundering. Another odd detail emerged when an anonymous female caller, known only by the moniker Green Eyes, contacted the police. She claimed to have information about Chuck's death, asserting that she had last seen Chuck the day before he was found dead. According to Green Eyes, Chuck had shown her a briefcase with large amounts of cash and spoken of meeting an unknown individual. One of the most prevalent theories points to mafia involvement. By the 1970s, Tucson was known to have pockets of organized crime activity, often involving money laundering tied to land deals. As an escrow agent, Chuck Morgan may have facilitated transactions that were more sinister than they initially appeared on paper. In fact, later investigations revealed that he did escrow work for at least one mafia family, though the extent of his knowledge and complicity is unknown, at least to the general public. If he discovered evidence of illegal activity or threatened to cooperate with federal authorities, it could have put a target on his back. No direct government confirmation of Chuck's role has ever surfaced publicly. Nonetheless, Morgan's line of work and sudden death, combined with local mafia activity, make the organized crime theory plausible. Another widely circulated theory suggests that Chuck was involved in clandestine government affairs, potentially as an undercover informant or a secret operative. Chuck claimed to his wife that he was doing work for the Treasury Department. If he was indeed an informant, it could explain his fear of law enforcement involvement. He may have believed some members of the police were compromised, or that he needed to protect his cover. That said, it provides little explanation for why he wouldn't have reached out to his alleged contacts in the Treasury Department. There's also the theory that the authorities got it right in their initial investigation. This line of thinking suggested that Chuck had become increasingly paranoid, possibly due to threats, real or imagined, and orchestrated a bizarre scenario. Under this theory, Chuck underwent some form of psychotic break, potentially due to the extreme stress he was under. This break then caused him to act increasingly unusually, which eventually culminated in his end by his own hand. Recently, there's been a number of clickbait headlines suggesting that the CIA has confirmed the existence of aliens on Mars 1 million years ago. So buckle up for a bit while we go beyond the clickbait and find out what the CIA actually said. In the early 1970s, the US government initiated a series of investigations into psychic phenomena, particularly focusing on remote viewing. This is the purported ability to perceive distant or unseen targets using extrasensory perception. This interest was largely driven by reports suggesting that the Soviet Union was investing substantial resources into similar research. Consequently, the Pentagon and the U.S. Army launched programs such as the Stargate Project to explore potential military and intelligence applications of these phenomena. On May 22, 1984, the CIA conducted a remote viewing session aimed at exploring the possibility of ancient life on Mars. The session was part of the broader Stargate project, which sought to assess the efficacy of remote viewing in gathering intelligence. In this particular experiment, a remote viewer was provided with sealed coordinates corresponding to specific locations on Mars, approximately 1 million years ago. During the session, the remote viewer described perceiving large pyramid-like structures on the Martian surface, suggesting the remnants of an ancient civilization. The viewer also reported encountering tall, thin beings clad in unusual clothing who appeared to be in distress due to environmental catastrophes. These beings were described as seeking a new habitat to ensure their survival, indicating a possible exodus from their declining environment. The recent declassification of these documents has reignited discussions about the potential existence of intelligent life on Mars in the distant past. However, it's crucial to recognize that remote viewing, as a method, lacks empirical scientific support and is often met with skepticism. The Stargate project itself was terminated and declassified in 1995 after a Pentagon report concluded that it was never useful in any intelligence operation. Information provided by the program was vague and included irrelevant and erroneous data, leading to its discontinuation, at least officially. So no, the CIA has not confirmed life on Mars, but they have confirmed that in 1984, a remote viewer claims to have seen Martian giants. In my view, the real mystery here is why this alien life narrative is being pushed so hard right now. It's one thing to discuss weird drone sightings, but this newly declassified information contributes absolutely nothing to the alien discourse, at least in my view. This tale centers on a figure described as a severely burned man who haunts the area, particularly near Camp Comfort County Park and along Creek Road. The origins of this legend are often traced back to a significant fire in 1948. According to local lore, a father and son were caught in a devastating house fire that year. The father perished in the flames, while the son survived but was horribly burned. Traumatized and disfigured, the son is said to have fled into the nearby woods, where he lived out his life, scaring and terrorizing the local populace. Another version of the story suggests that this legend resulted from a car accident in the late 1940s. In this account, a father and son were involved in a crash on an overlook near Ojai. The vehicle tumbled off the road, and while the son was thrown clear, the father was trapped inside as the car exploded into flames. The son, unable to save his father and witnessing his horrific death, was driven to madness. Some variations of this tale claim that the son was found by authorities, wearing his father's skin, before fleeing into the woods. The charman is often described as a human-like figure with burnt clothing and skin, his face appearing as if it's melting. Witnesses have reported a strong smell of burnt flesh preceding his appearance. He is said to lurk near Creek Road, especially around the bridge over San Antonio Creek, now colloquially known as Charman Bridge, according to some sources. Local legend holds that if one stops on this bridge and calls out for the charman, he may appear, sometimes attacking vehicles or individuals. Over the years, the legend has become an integral part of Ojai's cultural fabric. It's a popular subject of local ghost tours and campfire stories, captivating both residents and visitors. Some businesses have even embraced the legend. For instance, I was able to find a local hot sauce company named Charman, which pays homage to this eerie tale. The Grand Grimoire, also known as the Red Dragon, is one of the most infamous grimoires in occult history. Known for its association with black magic, it's said to contain powerful rituals for summoning demons and forming pacts. While some editions date the manuscript as far back as 1521 or 1522, historians argue the text is likely from the early 18th century. The text's authorship is attributed to one Antonio del Rabina, though little is known about this figure or whether he's even a historical person. Like many grimoires, it claims to have roots in the writings of King Solomon, a legendary figure often linked to magical wisdom. According to the Grand Grimoire, Antonio del Rabina wasn't actually the author of the book, but rather, he transcribed a text, which was written by Solomon himself. This practice of connecting magical texts to ancient authoritative sources was common and helped establish the book's credibility. The Grand Grimoire is divided into two main sections, each detailing specific magical practices. The first section outlines the evocation of Lucifuge Rofacal, described as a high-ranking demon serving under Lucifer himself. The text provides instructions on summoning Lucifuge and negotiating a pact, often aimed at acquiring wealth or worldly power. The second section deals with the specifics of making and sealing these demonic pacts. It explains the tools, rituals, and evocations necessary for the process, emphasizing the need for strict adherence to the outlined steps. Aside from its focus on demonology, the grimoire contains a variety of spells and rituals meant to address other desires. These include rites for love, invisibility, and communicating with the dead. Each spell typically requires specific tools, such as consecrated candles, engraved symbols, and protective circles, reflecting common elements in European occult practices of the period. These spells are presented with detailed instructions, underscoring the manuscript's emphasis on precision and ritualistic discipline. While its content draws heavily from earlier grimoires, such as the Grimoire of Pope Honorius, the Grand Grimoire gained a distinct reputation. Some have referred to it as the most dangerous grimoire, a claim rooted in its bold approach to summoning demons and securing power. Notably unlike other grimoires which dedicate significant time to protecting the magician, the Grand Grimoire simply gets down to the business of raw acquisition of power. However, some have argued that this is simply because it's a high-level specialized magic text, not to be engaged with by dabblers. Its reputation as a manual for black magic has been both a source of fascination and controversy. The Catholic Church, for instance, has allegedly condemned it, and legends claim the original manuscript resides in the Vatican's archives. Occult practitioners today view it as both a practical guide and a historical artifact. Some believe its rituals and spells hold genuine power, while others see it as a symbolic or psychological tool. Still others view it as a dangerous tome which doesn't offer adequate protection for the high-level magic it has on offer. Eric Stapleton, a 58-year-old resident of Quartzsite, Arizona, was reported missing in May 2014, prompting a community-wide search and raising concerns about his unexplained disappearance. Stapleton was last seen on May 18, 2014, at his residence near Riggles Road in Quartzsite. When he failed to report for work on May 20th, his absence was immediately noticed, as it was uncharacteristic of him to miss work without notice. Concern escalated when friends and family discovered his cell phone and car at his home with the front door left open, a scenario that suggested a sudden, urgent departure. In response to his disappearance, the Quartzsite Police Department issued a missing person notice and initiated a search operation. The local community, being very tight-knit, rallied together, distributing flyers and organizing search parties in hopes of locating Stapleton. Despite these concerted efforts, weeks passed without any significant leads or sightings. On January 20th, 2015, a breakthrough occurred when someone discovered human skeletal remains in the Skadden Wash area. This area is approximately 1 mile south of Interstate 10, near Quartzsite. The Quartzsite Police Department responded promptly, and the remains were sent to the Pima County Medical Examiner's office in Tucson for identification. Through dental record comparison, the remains were positively identified as those of Eric Stapleton. The discovery of Stapleton's remains provided some closure to his family and the community, yet many questions lingered. The circumstances surrounding his death remained unclear, with the cause and manner of death undetermined. As of now, his cause of death has not been disclosed, and the case remains open, suggesting foul play may have been involved. The Matsukawa derailment, which occurred in Japan on August 17, 1949, remains one of the most controversial and widely discussed railway incidents in the country's post-war history. The case initially appeared to be a straightforward act of sabotage against Japanese national railways, but would develop into something much bigger. The Matsukawa derailment took place on a section of the Tohoku Main Line near Matsukawa Station in Fukushima Prefecture. At around 3:09 a.m. on August 17, 1949, a passenger train traveling from Aomori to Tokyo derailed, causing the locomotive and several cars to topple over. 3 railway employees lost their lives in the accident, creating an immediate sense of shock and urgency. Japan, still reeling from the aftermath of the war, found itself grappling with labor disputes, severe economic hardship, and intense ideological conflict. Under these conditions, the authorities were quick to suspect that the derailment wasn't just an accident, but an act of sabotage intended to undermine the stability of critical infrastructure. Before long, suspicion fell on members of the Japan Communist Party, the JCP, and affiliated labor unions, including the National Railway Workers Union. In the broader historical context, 1949 saw 3 high-profile railway incidents, which had the country on edge. The other 2 were the Shimoyama incident, the mysterious death of JNR President Satonori Shimoyama, and the Mitaka incident, a runaway train incident. These events fueled an atmosphere of fear and suspicion, and they all became the subject of intense police scrutiny. Investigators believed that radical elements within the labor movement might have orchestrated these disasters to foment broader social unrest. They further suspected that these elements may have Soviet backing, as both the Americans and the Japanese were still worried about Japan drifting into the Soviet sphere. The government, which at the time was focused on suppressing leftist ideologies, found the perfect opportunity to clamp down on potential dissidents. This backdrop set the stage for the Matsukawa derailment trial. By October 1949, police had arrested a number of individuals, most of whom were union members or affiliated with the JCP. Ultimately, 20 people were charged and brought to trial in connection with the incident. The prosecution argued that the defendants had conspired to sabotage the railway, alleging that they removed the metal plates securing the rails together to cause the derailment. The defense countered that the evidence was circumstantial and that the authorities had coerced confessions through harsh interrogation methods that were not in line with democratic principles. Further, the defense team consistently argued that the train's derailment may have been due to technical or operational issues unrelated to sabotage. Critics claimed that the prosecution's case hinged too heavily on unsubstantiated claims and a political desire to quell leftist movements. The first round of decisions in lower courts found several defendants guilty. In 1953, the Sendai District Court delivered its verdict, convicting many of the accused and sentencing some of them to elimination. The harshness of these rulings shocked observers both locally and internationally. International human rights organizations and Japanese advocates criticized the seeming lack of direct evidence and the possibility of confessions obtained under duress. Appeals were filed, and the case moved up the judicial ladder, landing in the Tohoku High Court. In a surprising turn of events, the Tohoku High Court in 1959 overturned the lower court's ruling, acquitting all 20 defendants. This acquittal was a landmark moment in Japan's post-war legal history, as prior to the war, appellate courts had been extremely deferential to trial rulings. The prosecution, however, refused to accept the verdict and appealed to the Supreme Court of Japan. The Supreme Court scrutinized the evidence, examined testimony, and considered allegations that the authorities might have manipulated or suppressed critical information. It wasn't until 1963 that the Supreme Court finally upheld the High Court's acquittal verdict. The final court decision concluded there was insufficient evidence to prove that any of the accused had intentionally removed the track's fastenings. This ruling also highlighted deficiencies in the investigation, including mishandled evidence, questionable interrogation tactics, and government overreach in targeting political opponents. By exonerating the defendants, the Matsukawa derailment case underscored the importance of legal safeguards and the risk of political persecution masquerading as law enforcement. Ultimately, the case was quietly shut down in 1970, without any official ruling on what caused the derailment. Was the Matsukawa incident simply a case of tragic infrastructure failure in a still war-ravaged and devastated economic environment? Or was it something more sinister? Given the actions of the authorities in this investigation, this looks as though it will remain an unsolved mystery. The Philosopher's Stone has long been regarded as one of the most elusive goals in the history of Western esotericism and occultism. It's a legendary substance that alchemists believed could transmute base metals into gold, cure diseases, and even grant extended or eternal life. Though often dismissed as a quaint relic of pre-scientific thought, the quest for the Philosopher's Stone was anchored in a complex interplay of chemistry, spirituality, philosophy, and mysticism. The roots of the Philosopher's Stone concept can be traced to the Hellenistic period, especially in the city of Alexandria, where various philosophical and religious traditions intermingled. Early texts that influenced alchemical thought, such as the writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, laid the groundwork for the idea that matter could be transmuted. Over time, these early works merged with Arab and Persian scholarly traditions. Following the Islamic conquests, Greek manuscripts on natural philosophy and the proto-science of alchemy were translated into both Arabic and Persian. By the Middle Ages, when these Arabic and Persian texts were translated back into Latin, European alchemists were primed to embrace the elusive notion of the Philosopher's Stone. In medieval and early Renaissance Europe, alchemy enjoyed periods of both acclaim and suspicion. The distinction between science and magic was not as clear-cut as it is today, and alchemists often combined practical experimentation with esoteric symbolism. The Philosopher's Stone was not merely a literal object. Rather, many alchemists understood it as the culmination of both a chemical and spiritual journey. In this sense, the stone symbolized perfection, enlightenment, and the harmonization of opposites. Achieving it required not just laboratory work, but also moral purification and personal transformation. The stone's ability to turn lead into gold was seen as a metaphor for uplifting the human soul from its base state to divine perfection. One of the most famous figures associated with the quest for the Philosopher's Stone was Nicolas Flamel, a 14th century French scribe and manuscript seller. Although historical evidence suggests Flamel's reputation as an alchemist was largely a product of later legends rather than contemporary records, he became a central figure in alchemical lore. According to the stories, Flamel, with the guidance of obscure texts and revelations, supposedly discovered the secret of the stone and achieved both wealth and longevity. Similarly, the 16th century Swiss physician and alchemist Paracelsus advanced alchemy's medical dimensions and integrated them with natural philosophy. Though he didn't claim to have found the Philosopher's Stone, Paracelsus believed in the possibility of extracting essences from substances that could cure illnesses and prolong life. His emphasis on observation, experimentation, and the healing potential of minerals and plants helped transition alchemy toward more empirical approaches. The tradition of seeking the Philosopher's Stone was not confined to Europe's elite intellectual circles. Courtly alchemists worked under royal patronage, hoping to bolster a monarch's wealth and prestige by conjuring gold from cheaper metals. Individuals like Rudolph II of the Holy Roman Empire were fascinated by alchemy, amassing manuscripts and skilled practitioners in the hope of unlocking nature's secrets. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the rise of the scientific method, better instrumentation, and new theoretical frameworks began to strip alchemy of its mystical elements. By the late 18th century, the dream of the Philosopher's Stone had effectively receded into myth, replaced by a rigorous approach to understanding of elements and chemical reactions. Also, I mentioned it briefly in passing earlier, but it's really worth emphasizing that the concept of the Philosopher's Stone was never purely about precious metals. In many treatises, gold was simply the most elevated and incorruptible of metals, symbolizing the highest possible refinement. The stone, therefore, was a metaphor for achieving ultimate purity and understanding the inner workings of nature. This symbolic dimension survived even as the literal pursuit faded. In the 19th and 20th centuries, scholars and esotericists rediscovered alchemical texts with renewed interest, viewing them through psychological and symbolic lenses. Psychologist Carl Jung interpreted alchemical imagery as representations of internal psychic processes. In Jung's reading, the philosopher's stone was the perfected self, reached through individuation and inner work. The Mogollon Monster, often referred to as Arizona's Bigfoot, is a cryptid said to inhabit the Mogollon Rim, a rugged escarpment extending across central and eastern Arizona. Eyewitnesses commonly describe it as a large, bipedal ape-like creature standing over 7 feet tall, with long black or reddish-brown hair covering its body. Its eyes are often reported as large and red, and it is said to emit a strong, unpleasant odor, reminiscent of a combination of dead fish and a skunk. Witnesses have also claimed that the creature lets out a blood-curdling scream, which has been described as sounding like a woman in great distress. The earliest known report dates back to 1903 in a newspaper known as the Arizona Republican. In this account, a man described encountering a creature near the Grand Canyon with long white hair and matted beard that reached to his knees. The man also noted that the creature was wielding a club and screeching during their encounter. According to one account of a cryptozoologist, an encounter occurred during a Boy Scout trip near Payson, Arizona in the 1940s. The creature the scouts ran across was described as having deep-set, expressionless eyes, a hairless face, and a square-shaped head. However, all that said, I wasn't able to find any primary accounts of this from the time, so I suspect it was likely made up. Numerous hikers and other wilderness enjoyers in the area have also reported encounters with the creature over the course of the 20th and 21st centuries. Additionally, several individuals on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation have claimed encounters with the Mogollon Monster throughout the years. The scientific community generally attributes these sightings to misidentifications or hoaxes. They dismiss the idea that a large humanoid creature could remain hidden in such an area, categorizing it as mythology rather than science. Some skeptics suggest that sightings may be attributed to known animals. As recently as the mid-1930s, grizzly bears inhabited Arizona's forests. Other large mammals, such as black bears, mountain lions, elk, and even owls, could also account for these reports. The Mogollon Monster has become an integral part of Arizona's folklore, inspiring various tales and legends. One story involves an Arizona pioneer named Sam Spade, who built a log cabin near what is now Camp Geronimo, only to be attacked by the creature. Later, his son and future daughter-in-law were reportedly killed by the monster on their wedding day. These narratives suggest the creature's origins stem from either displaced Native Americans seeking revenge or a pioneer cursed by spirits after escaping an attack by Native Americans. Another tale describes the monster as the phantom of a colonist punished for slaying a Native American woman and doomed to roam the woods eternally. Others link the Mogollon Monster to legends of skinwalkers, strongly suggesting the being is a supernatural creature rather than an actual animal. Yet others claim it's an alien or interdimensional entity roaming the area. The Gold Sock Killer is the moniker given to an unidentified serial offender responsible for the slayings of a woman and 2 teenage girls in Broward County, Florida, in 1973. The nickname derives from the perpetrator's method of strangling his victims with socks, notably using a gold-colored sock in 2 instances. The first known victim was 42-year-old Kelpian Patrick, whose body was discovered on July 4th, 1973. She had been strangled with a sock, and her body was left in a field near Fort Lauderdale. On August 2nd, 1973, 17-year-old Barbara Schreiber was found slain under similar circumstances. She had been strangled with a gold-colored sock, and her body was left in a wooded area near Pompano Beach. The third victim, 16-year-old Belinda Hutchins, was discovered on August 24, 1973. She had been strangled with a gold-colored sock, and her body was found in a canal near Hollywood, Florida. However, one woman was lucky enough to escape with her life. On July 25, 1973, a 25-year-old woman in Fort Lauderdale narrowly escaped an attack by someone believed to be the perpetrator. As she entered her first-floor apartment around 9:15 p.m., the assailant, who had broken in by prying open a window, confronted her and attempted to strangle her with a sock. The woman fought back vigorously, kicking and screaming, which led to a struggle that overturned a coffee table and ended with both of them falling onto the couch. The perpetrator then got up and fled, likely fearing that her screams and the commotion would attract attention. The victim described her assailant as a slim, blonde-haired white man. Despite extensive investigations and the harrowing first-hand account, the identity of the gold sock killer remains unknown. The case has grown cold over the decades, with no new leads or suspects emerging. The gold sock killer's crimes are part of a broader pattern of unsolved slayings in South Florida during the 1970s that remain unresolved to this day. Because of this, some have speculated that he may be responsible for many more slayings than we know of. Notably, the police identified a man as a suspect in 1974 after he strangled a woman with a scarf. However, there was insufficient evidence to charge him in relation to the gold sock slayings. Like with many unsolved crimes we've discussed throughout this series, I suspect at this point, the best chance of resolution will be through genetic genealogy techniques. That said, it's unclear to me if the authorities have retained any of the genetic genealogy firms to help them investigate this case. Hey everyone, welcome to part 99 of my ongoing Unsolved Mysteries series, where we discuss crime, mysterious disappearances, myths and legends, the paranormal, internet mysteries, and more. The Phoenix freeway shootings, sometimes referred to as the I-10 shootings, rattled Arizona's largest city in late summer 2015. Between August 29th and September 10th of that year, a string of frightening incidents occurred on Interstate 10, one of Phoenix's main arteries. Drivers reported bullets striking their vehicles, shattering windows and endangering lives. The Arizona Department of Public Safety, better known as the DPS, took immediate notice of the attacks and launched a manhunt. The FBI and the ATF also joined forces with the DPS to analyze bullet fragments and potential ballistic matches. Early in the investigation, officials confirmed that numerous shootings had similar characteristics, though the exact count varied as more incidents were reported and ruled out. At least 11 separate cases were closely examined. Some vehicles were hit by bullets, others were struck by projectiles that might have been pellets or even debris. This led to widespread speculation. Was there a single shooter, or were copycats capitalizing on the chaos? The confusion intensified when investigators noted that not all incidents were definitively linked to the same weapon or suspect. On September 18, 2015, authorities announced a major breakthrough: the arrest of a 21-year-old landscaper. Also, for reasons which will become apparent shortly, I'm not going to give his name here or show his picture. Investigators claimed that ballistic testing matched his weapon to 4 of the shootings, stating that the weapon could not have been involved in the others. The DPS chief said they were confident in the match, though details were initially sparse. His arrest was a moment of relief for many in Phoenix, and local media proclaimed the shooter to be definitively caught. However, the sense of resolution would be short-lived. The alleged shooter maintained his innocence from the start, claiming that his weapon had been in a pawn shop during most of the shootings. His lawyer presented receipts to show that the weapon was inaccessible to him at the time of several incidents. Further subsequent ballistic testing raised serious doubts about whether the weapon was indeed used at all. By April 2016, prosecutors dropped all charges against him. The forensic evidence was simply inconclusive, and the state couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt the elements of the offense. As the case against him quickly unraveled, the once publicly identified suspect was free to go. The dropping of charges against this man created a significant vacuum. If he wasn't the freeway shooter, who was? Well, that's where the mystery arises, because as of now, there's no definitive answer. The DPS continued to investigate, but no alternative suspect was ever conclusively identified or charged in connection with the events. Further, it's worth noting that some of the reported shootings might have been the result of road debris getting swept up into mass hysteria. Notably, the falsely accused suspect ended up filing a lawsuit, and after a trial and appeals all the way up to the Court of Appeal, he was awarded $1 million in 2021. Between 1972 and 1973, New York City was terrorized by a series of brutal attacks targeting young boys of Black and Puerto Rican descent. And yeah, just a quick programming note, I'm going to have to censor myself a bit for this section. The chop-off portion of this serial predator's name refers to exactly the worst thing you can think of. The first known victim was 8-year-old Douglas Owens, whose lifeless body was discovered on March 9, 1972, atop a Harlem rooftop. He had been stabbed 38 times, and his body was subject to extreme desecration. This horrific act was soon followed by another attack on April 20, 1972, when a 10-year-old boy was lured away, stabbed multiple times, and subjected to the same disturbing defilement. Miraculously, he survived and provided the police with a description of his attacker: a slender man with medium dark skin, possibly walking with a limp, and having a mole on his left cheek. Despite this eyewitness account, the perpetrator eluded capture. On October 23, 1972, 9-year-old Wendell Hubbard was found on the roof of his East Harlem apartment building. He had been stabbed 17 times, and again his body was subject to desecration. The pattern of these crimes instilled fear throughout the community, as parents grappled with the horrifying reality that a predator was targeting their children. The terror continued into the following year, and on March 6, 1973, 9-year-old Luis Ortiz disappeared while running an errand to a local store. His body was later found in a basement stairwell. He had been stabbed 38 times. The final known victim was 8-year-old Stephen Cropper, whose body was discovered on August 17, 1973, on a Lower East Side rooftop. Unlike the previous victims, Cropper had been slashed with a razor, and there had been no additional defilement. This deviation in the killer's modus operandi puzzled investigators, but was ultimately linked to the same perpetrator due to the similarities in victim profile and location. Also, you'll want to keep the differences in mind, because this is going to become a major factor in whether this mystery is properly unsolved or not. The community's outrage and fear reached a boiling point, leading to public protests and demands for increased police protection. Some members of the community questioned whether adequate resources were being allocated to the investigation. In May 1974, a potential breakthrough occurred when 33-year-old Erno Soto was arrested after attempting to abduct a young boy. Soto, an unemployed former substance addict with a history of mental illness, confessed to the slaying of Stephen Cropper. However, inconsistencies in his statements and his mental instability complicated the case. Notably, officials from Manhattan State Hospital indicated that Soto had been in their custody at the time of some of the slayings. However, it was later revealed that he may have been out on day passes or overnight passes during some or all of the events. Despite the confession, the lack of concrete evidence in Soto's mental condition prevented a definitive conclusion. In December 1976, he was deemed unfit for trial and was recommitted to a mental institution. The slayings ceased following his arrest, leading some investigators to believe he was indeed the perpetrator. However, due to the absence of a trial and conviction, the case remains officially unsolved. Notably, it seems as though investigators were sure that Soto was the perpetrator and simply stopped investigating the crimes. This could have been the perfect opportunity for the actual perpetrator to cease committing said offenses. Also, as you will recall, Soto only confessed to the slaying of Stephen Cropper, whose slaying was missing many of the elements of the other attacks. Nahuelito is a legendary creature purported to inhabit Nahuel Huapi Lake in Patagonia, Argentina. Often compared to Scotland's Loch Ness Monster, Nahuelito has been described as a large, serpentine being, sometimes resembling a plesiosaur. The origins of the Nahuelito legend trace back to the indigenous Mapuche people, who inhabited the region long before European colonization. The Mapuche spoke of El Cuero, a monstrous aquatic creature lurking in the depths of Nahuel Huapi Lake. Described as a giant stingray-like being with a sucker-like mouth, El Cuero was feared for its alleged propensity to drag unsuspecting victims into the water. These early tales laid the foundation for the Nahuelito legend that would later emerge. In the early 20th century, reports of a mysterious creature in Nahuel Huapi Lake began to surface, attracting significant attention. In 1910, George Garrett, a manager of a company operating near the lake, reported seeing a creature approximately 400 meters away. He described the visible part of the animal as being between 5 and 7 meters long, protruding about 2 meters above the water. Garrett's account, however, wasn't made public until 1922, when he shared his experience with the Toronto Globe newspaper. This revelation spurred further interest and led to organized expeditions in search of the elusive creature. One notable expedition was led by the director of the Buenos Aires Zoo. In 1922, after receiving reports of a possible strange creature inhabiting Patagonian lakes, the director organized a search for this South American Nessie. Despite the efforts, and verifying the expectations of the numerous skeptics, the expedition failed to produce conclusive evidence of the creature's existence. The small lake where the presence of the creature was claimed is known today as Laguna del Plesiosaurio. I'll let you figure out what that means in English. The legend of Nahuelito persisted throughout the 20th century, with sporadic reports and alleged sightings. In 1960, the Argentine Navy reportedly engaged in an 18-day pursuit of an unidentified underwater object in Nahuel Huapi Lake. Although the object was never identified, some speculated that it might have been Nahuelito. In 1988, photographs purportedly depicting Nahuelito were published in what I've seen reported as either a magazine or a newspaper. Also, for anyone just listening to this video, you may want to take a brief moment to look at this most famous photograph of the creature. I mean, it's your standard lake monster picture, but you still may want to look at it since it's the most iconic photograph of Nahuelito. The anonymous sender claimed that the images showed the creature's hump-like form emerging from the water. The sender also included a note indicating that the photograph definitely didn't depict a log. Personally, I enjoy when cryptid photographs have explanations that the photographs are indeed not a hoax. Really enhances the credibility. Despite the intrigue, the authenticity of these photographs remains unverified. Various theories have been proposed to explain the Nahuelito phenomenon. Some suggest that the creature is a surviving plesiosaur, a notion popularized by its physical description. However, this theory faces significant scientific challenges, particularly regarding the geological history of the region's lakes, which formed long after plesiosaurs became extinct. Another hypothesis posits that Nahulito is the result of mutations caused by nuclear experiments conducted on Huemul Island during the 1950s. These experiments aimed to develop nuclear fusion technology, and some speculate that they may have led to the creation of a mutant creature inhabiting the lake. And yes, for anyone out there wondering, this is my preferred theory on the creature. It's definitely a nuclear Nessie. Skeptics argue that sightings of Nahulito can be attributed to misidentifications of natural phenomena such as floating logs, large fish, or optical illusions. Despite the absence of scientific validation, Nahulito has become an integral part of local folklore and identity in the region. Much like other cryptids, the creature features prominently in local festivals, merchandise, and tourism, symbolizing the enduring allure of the unknown. Psychic vampires, often referred to as energy vampires, are individuals who drain the emotional or psychic energy of others, leaving their victims feeling exhausted or depleted. Unlike the mythical blood-sucking vampires of folklore, psychic vampires feed on the life force or emotional energy of their targets. This concept has roots in various cultural beliefs and has been explored in both occult practices and psychological studies. The idea of energy vampirism dates back to ancient civilizations. In Eastern mysticism, concepts like ki in Chinese philosophy or prana in Hindu traditions refer to the vital life force present in all living beings. Occult practitioners believe that psychic vampires have the ability to absorb this life force from others. In Western esoteric traditions, such as Hermeticism and Theosophy, discussions about astral energies and the manipulation thereof often include references to these beings. Psychic vampires typically exhibit behaviors that enable them to siphon energy from others. They may be highly self-centered, lacking empathy, and often engage in manipulative tactics to elicit emotional responses. Common traits include constant complaining, playing the victim, or creating unnecessary drama to draw attention and energy toward themselves. These individuals may not always be conscious of their actions, but the impact on their victims is palpable, often resulting in feelings of fatigue, irritability, or emotional distress. Psychic vampires can be categorized based on their methods and intentions. Intentional psychic vampires are individuals who are aware of their actions and deliberately seek to drain others' energy for personal gain or satisfaction. They may employ specific techniques to tap into others' life force, often under the guise of seeking help or support. Unintentional psychic vampires are people who are typically unaware of their draining behavior. They might be dealing with personal issues, leading them to unconsciously draw energy from those around them. Their neediness and constant demands can leave others feeling exhausted and depleted through no intentional fault of their own. Further, in certain situations, individuals who are not typically energy drainers may become psychic vampires. High-stress environments or personal crises can cause someone to temporarily exhibit energy-draining behaviors. Notably, unlike most other occult topics discussed in this iceberg series, psychic vampirism is likely something that's been experienced by everyone at some point in their lives. Everyone has had that experience of encountering a person who, for whatever reason, just has the ability to completely drain them. That said, the concept is also quite controversial, as it allows people to dismiss those who are in legitimate need of emotional assistance as quote-unquote vampires. This could have the effect of causing people to bottle in their emotions, which could lead to a whole host of other problems. Quick shout out to all my YouTube members and patrons. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends. And now for an update on a fairly well-known Jane Doe case, which was solved just this month. On July 11th, 1978, a New Mexico Highway Department foreman discovered the body of a young woman near just outside Santa Rosa, New Mexico. The victim had been shot twice in the back of the head with a .22 caliber weapon, and shell casings were found nearby. Despite investigative efforts, she remained unidentified for decades, becoming known as the Guadalupe County Jane Doe. The victim was a white female, estimated to be between 17 and 25 years old. She stood approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed around 145 pounds. She had strawberry blonde hair, blue eyes, and multiple ear piercings, 3 in the left ear and 2 in the right. Her attire included blue denim cutoff shorts, a white and navy vest or halter top, brown moccasins, and Native American-style jewelry. Dental examinations revealed she had received dental care, with 4 fillings and only 1 wisdom tooth present. The investigation into her death led authorities to Ronald Lanphier and Diana Geisinger, a couple involved in a series of crimes during that period. Lanphier had escaped from a South Dakota prison in early July 1978 and reunited with Geisinger in Sioux City, Iowa. The pair planned to travel to Las Vegas to marry and then settle in Texas. During their journey, they committed several violent crimes, including robbery and murder. According to Geisinger's later testimony, they encountered the young woman at a motel in Perry, Oklahoma, on the night of July 9th or 10th, 1978. She was carrying a guitar and mentioned she was hitchhiking to California to visit her mother. She also noted that July 11th was her 17th birthday. The trio spent time together, stopping for coffee and visiting a bar. On July 11th, the young woman asked to stop at a payphone to call her mother for her birthday. As she exited the vehicle along the highway, Lanphier shot her twice in the back of the head. They then robbed her, taking her guitar, a coin purse containing $1.50, and her birth certificate before disposing of her body near the highway. After the slaying, Lanphier and Geisinger continued their crime spree, traveling to Nevada and California before their eventual arrest in October 1978. Geisinger became the prosecution's key witness, leading to Lanphier's conviction and death sentence. Despite the arrest and conviction of her killers, the identity of the Guadalupe County Jane Doe remained unknown for many years. In 2019, her remains were sent to the University of North Texas for DNA analysis in hopes of identifying her. In December 2024, it was announced that she had been successfully identified. However, per her family's wishes, her name has not been publicly disclosed. Also, let me know in the comments if you want to hear updates on resolutions to cases as I go forward into this series. I have a feeling most people like hearing resolutions to long-standing mysteries, and I do as well. So honestly, I'm probably doing it regardless. Also, one quick programming note on this case. It's virtually impossible to find any information on Lanphier and Geisinger, despite the fact that they eliminated 3 innocent people on a deranged cross-country road trip. Aside from court records and a post on r/RBI about the former Jane Doe, there's just nothing out there. Feng Shui is an ancient Chinese practice focused on harmonizing individuals with their surrounding environment through the strategic arrangement of spaces, objects, and structures. Also known as Chinese geomancy, it's rooted in the belief that the natural world is filled with vital energy known as qi. This energy can be optimized or disrupted depending on how one's surroundings are composed. Although it's frequently discussed today in terms of interior design and real estate, Feng Shui's origins and historical significance stretch back thousands of years. The early beginnings of Feng Shui can be traced to roughly 6,000 years ago, when people were first starting to align human settlements and grave sites with the natural landscape. By the time of the Zhou dynasty, starting in the 11th century BC, Chinese thinkers had begun to develop more explicit guidelines for positioning homes, temples, and tombs. These alignments were made in ways that aligned with cosmological concepts like the flow of qi and the balance of yin and yang. These guidelines weren't purely aesthetic. They were designed to maintain harmony between heaven, earth, and humanity, which was a central tenet in Chinese thought. For instance, grave sites were carefully chosen to ensure that ancestors rested in areas believed to be charged with auspicious energy, which would, in turn, benefit their living descendants. By the Tang dynasty, running from the 7th to 10th centuries AD, feng shui masters had gained considerable influence in imperial courts. Royal palaces, government buildings, and entire city layouts began incorporating feng shui principles to ensure stability, prosperity, and harmony. During subsequent dynasties, the popularity of feng shui spread widely, influencing not only official construction projects and the elites, but also the environments of common people. In these periods, a more standardized body of knowledge emerged, with feng shui texts, manuals, and lineage-based traditions passed down through families of masters. Throughout its long history, feng shui has been influenced by various philosophical and religious currents. Confucianism emphasized social harmony and the importance of honoring ancestors, which resonated with feng shui's focus on selecting burial sites that would benefit future generations. Taoism, with its belief in the fundamental balance and flow of the universe, complemented feng shui's emphasis on qi and the natural order. Buddhism also interacted with feng shui practices. Over the centuries, Buddhist temples and monasteries incorporated feng shui principles to ensure spiritual well-being and tranquility. After China began to open up to the world in the 1980s and 1990s, traditional cultural practices, including feng shui, underwent a resurgence. Architects, interior designers, and real estate professionals worldwide have embraced certain feng shui principles, often in a secularized or watered-down form. In Hong Kong, for example, feng shui masters are often consulted before constructing skyscrapers, and the city's skyline is said to reflect these principles. The global popularity of feng shui in the late 20th and early 21st centuries can also be attributed to the broader Western interest in holistic practices, alternative medicine, and spirituality. On February 15, 1997, the body of an unidentified woman, later referred to as the Monadnock River Jane Doe, was discovered in the Monadnock River in Braintree, Massachusetts. A man canoeing in the river found her remains just a few hundred yards from the Braintree police station. The woman was an Asian female, estimated to be between 25 and 35 years old, standing approximately 4 feet 11 inches to 5 feet tall, and weighing between 85 to 90 pounds. She had short black hair, about half an inch in length, and distinctive dark eyes. Compounding the tragedy, she was 8 to 10 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. At the time of her discovery, she was clothed in a gray striped shirt, a rust-colored ski jacket, black stretch pants labeled with the name Maria Marin, and white sneakers sized 5.5. The presence of the name tag led investigators to explore the possibility that Maria could be a clue to her identity, or perhaps the previous owner of the clothing. An autopsy was conducted and determined that the cause of death was drowning, with no immediate signs of foul play. This led authorities to consider the possibility of an accidental drowning. However, the circumstances surrounding her death remained unclear. Fingerprints were taken and compared against national databases, but no matches were found, leaving her identity a mystery. Over the years, the case of the Monadnock River Jane Doe has remained unsolved. Despite efforts by law enforcement and public appeals for information, her identity and the events leading to her death have not been uncovered. I suspect that, like many recently solved Jane and John Doe cases, this one will be resolved through genetic genealogy, if it's ever resolved at all. I don't believe this Jane Doe's death was an accidental drowning, largely due to her pregnancy, but due to other factors as well. At 8 to 10 weeks pregnant, she may have been in a vulnerable emotional or physical state, potentially making her a target for foul play. Pregnant women often experience significant stress or interpersonal conflict, which could lead to dangerous situations. My suspicion, given that she was 8 to 10 weeks pregnant, is that she may have told the father of the child about the pregnancy. He perhaps suggested a termination, and when she wasn't agreeable to this, she may have been eliminated. This, of course, is just speculation on my part based on the evidence, but the circumstantial evidence is strong. Additionally, the fact that she was fully clothed in a ski jacket and stretch pants suggests she wasn't prepared to enter the water, either for recreation or by accident. Her discovery near a public area also raises questions about how she ended up in the river without anyone noticing. While drowning was the official cause of death, the circumstances surrounding her case warrant deeper scrutiny beyond mere accident. In June 1988, 23-year-old Philip Innes Fraser embarked on a journey from his hometown of Anchorage, Alaska, to Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. Philip would never arrive, sparking decades of speculation about who's responsible for what happened to him. The son of two prominent physicians, Philip was known for his love of the outdoors and his talent as a violinist. His trip was fraught with delays, including complications at the Canadian border, where his legal weapons were confiscated. And keep this in mind because this may have sealed his fate. On June 18, 1988, Philip stopped at the 40 Mile Flats Cafe in British Columbia, approximately 600 miles south of the Alaska border. There, he encountered a hitchhiker described as a Caucasian male, around 5 feet 9 inches tall, weighing 225 pounds, with brown hair and eyes, and appearing to be between 20 and 25 years old. Despite initial hesitation, Philip agreed to give the man a ride. And when I say hesitation, the owners of the cafe observed that he told the hitchhiker to essentially get lost. However, they also observed the hitchhiker chasing Philip's vehicle as he tried to pull out of the parking lot, and Philip, against his better judgment, let him in the vehicle. Approximately 8 hours later, and 200 miles south of the cafe, the hitchhiker was found by a couple in Kitwanga, British Columbia, claiming to be Philip Fraser from Anchorage. The couple found the man to be very odd, but they allowed him to stay over because he claimed he was having car troubles. Despite claiming to be Philip, the man was, you guessed it, a chubby Caucasian male with brown hair and brown eyes, appearing to be about 20 to 25 years old. He spent the night at their home and attempted to sell Philip's car to them, further arousing their suspicions due to his nervous behavior and possession of 2 wallets. The following day, Philip's burned-out 1983 Volkswagen Jetta was discovered at a car wash in Prince George, British Columbia. 6 weeks later, on July 27, 1988, Philip's body was found in a gravel turnaround near Highway 37, about 47 kilometers east of Stewart, British Columbia. The hitchhiker, who remains unidentified, is the prime suspect in Philip's slaying. Investigators believe he assumed Philip's identity after the ending, as Philip's credit cards, checkbook, passport, and birth certificate have never been found. Notably, whether any of these documents were ever used for financial transactions or any other purpose remains unknown, at least to the general public. As always with open investigations, information is released to the public on a need-to-know basis. Despite a composite sketch and witness descriptions all describing someone who's clearly the same man, The case remains unsolved nearly 4 decades later. Over the years, there's been speculation linking Canadian serial perpetrator Michael Wayne McGray to Philip, as McGray was active during that time and matched the suspect's description. However, sources within the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have reportedly ruled him out as a suspect, and he was largely active on the East Coast, not the West Coast. Also, while sources state that he matches the description of the perpetrator in this case, personally I'm not seeing it at all. And if you're just watching, I've put one of the sketches side by side with McGray. It's hard not to wonder whether Philip's story might have played out very differently if the Canadian authorities hadn't confiscated his legal weapons. Maybe he would have had some way to defend himself, or maybe it wouldn't have mattered. We'll never really know, but it's an unfortunately haunting what if. What seems clear is that his decision to let that hitchhiker into his car, despite his initial gut feeling, turned out to be a tragic turning point. The fact that the hitchhiker then pretended to be Philip and tried to sell his car says a lot about the killer's brazenness. It's possible he was just seizing an opportunity to escape his own circumstances, financial troubles, a criminal past, or something else entirely. But we're still missing huge pieces of the puzzle, like what happened to Philip's credit cards, passport, and other documents. Maybe the RCMP is keeping some details under wraps so that only the real perpetrator would know them. Maybe someday we'll get that vital tip or piece of evidence that finally identifies the mysterious hitchhiker. Until then, Philip Fraser's tragic story stands as a stark reminder that sometimes even a small act of kindness, like offering a stranger a ride, can have devastating consequences. Philip Taylor Kramer, born on July 12, 1952 in Youngstown, Ohio, was a multifaceted individual whose life encompassed great success in both music and engineering. He's perhaps best remembered as the bassist for the rock band Iron Butterfly during the mid-1970s. Kramer joined Iron Butterfly in 1974, a band that was then trying to recapture the magic of their 1968 hit, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. Also, I can't be the only one who thinks of that one Simpsons scene where Bart and Milhouse have their church perform the song as a hymn whenever this song comes up, right? Or perhaps I've just had too many Simpsons episodes on in the background lately. Anyway, I've gone totally off script here. Let's get back to the mystery. He contributed to the band's later works, playing on 2 albums, Scorching Beauty and Sun and Steel, both released in 1975. Despite these efforts, the albums didn't achieve significant commercial success, and the band eventually broke up. Following his departure from the music scene, Kramer pursued a career in engineering. He earned a degree in aerospace engineering and worked on the MX missile guidance system for a contractor of the U.S. Department of Defense. Kramer's engineering pursuits extended into the then burgeoning field of computer technology. In 1990, he co-founded Total Multimedia Inc. with Randy Jackson. No, not that Randy Jackson. The other Randy Jackson, Michael Jackson's brother. The company claimed to have developed the first video compression capable of producing full-motion video from a CD-ROM in 1992. Kramer also worked on facial recognition systems and advanced communication systems. Regarding the latter, he launched a project that purportedly involved faster-than-light communication, challenging established scientific theories. Keep this latter part in mind because we're going to come back to it shortly. On February 12, 1995, Kramer disappeared under mysterious circumstances. He was en route to Los Angeles International Airport to pick up a business associate and the associate's wife. During his travel, Kramer made several phone calls, including to his wife and former Iron Butterfly bandmate Ron Bushy. In a final call to the police, he stated, "I want everyone to know O.J. Simpson is innocent. They did it." He also stated that he would be engaging in self-deletion activities. Prior to his disappearance, Kramer had been hired to analyze the authenticity of a videotape related to the O.J. trial. Following this call, he vanished, prompting a widespread search and media coverage. Kramer's disappearance led to numerous theories and speculations. Some suggested that his work in advanced technologies, particularly his claims about faster-than-light communication, made him a target for foul play. Additionally, his involvement in analyzing evidence related to the Simpson case fueled further conjecture. Some claimed rogue elements in the LAPD may have had their hand in his disappearance at worst, or that the authorities weren't overly eager to investigate at best. Despite these theories, no concrete evidence emerged to support claims of foul play. On May 29, 1999, over 4 years after his disappearance, Kramer's remains were discovered inside his wrecked minivan at the bottom of Decker Canyon near Malibu, California. The Ventura County Coroner's Office ruled the death as a probable self-deletion. However, Kramer's family, particularly his father, expressed doubts about this conclusion. His father stated that Kramer had previously mentioned being threatened and had explicitly told him that if he ever makes threats of a self-deletionary nature, they aren't real. These statements have led some to continue questioning the true nature of his death. The nobody theory began gaining traction on 4chan around 2018, particularly on the X board, which is dedicated to paranormal and conspiracy discussions. Unlike many conspiracy theories that focus on specific events or figures, the nobody theory is centered around a mysterious, nameless individual referred to as the Nobody. According to the theory, nobody is an enlightened being who possesses deep, almost godlike wisdom and is aware of the true nature of reality. He is believed to be working behind the scenes to bring about significant changes in the world, although his exact motivations and methods are deliberately obscured. The identity of nobody is never revealed, adding to the allure and mystery of the theory. Proponents suggest that nobody could be absolutely anyone, and theories suggest this figure is much more likely to be the individual you would least expect. This figure is seen as both a savior and a disruptor, someone who will challenge the existing power structures, but also possess a moral compass that is beyond human understanding. One of the key reasons for the appeal of the nobody conspiracy theory lies in its open-ended nature. Unlike more rigid conspiracy theories, which tend to provide a clear narrative with identifiable villains and heroes, the nobody theory is vague and flexible. The anonymity and ambiguity of the nobody potentially resonates with the anonymous culture of the site and the board, where anonymity is a core principle. The structure of the theory relies heavily on cryptic posts and discussions, often laden with references to philosophy, esotericism, and occultism. The theory's roots also mean that it is often presented with a mix of irony and sincerity. This makes it extremely difficult to discern whether proponents truly believe in the theory or are engaging in a form of modern myth-making. Anyway, if the nobody's real and is listening right now, try giving worldwide economic stability and peace a shot instead of, the usual stuff. Hey, it's your boy Jimmy here with a quick shout out to all my subscribers, patrons, and YouTube members. You're the coolest cats around. Now let's get back to it. Chaos magic is an unconventional and highly flexible form of modern occultism that emphasizes personal experimentation and the fluidity of belief systems. Emerging in the late 20th century, chaos magic gained momentum in the 1970s, with key texts such as Liber Null by Peter J. Carroll and the Book of Results by Ray Sherwin. These works laid the foundation for a practice rooted in pragmatism and innovation, allowing practitioners to draw from a wide range of magical traditions and psychological techniques. One of the most fundamental tenets of chaos magic is the concept of belief as a tool. Unlike other magical traditions that require adherence to specific deities or rituals, chaos magicians view belief itself as something that can be shaped and manipulated. The only purpose of belief in this system is to achieve desired outcomes. This approach allows for a level of flexibility and adaptability that is rare in more traditional forms of magic. By shifting beliefs, the practitioner can adopt new perspectives, experiment with different techniques, and ultimately create a system of magic that is uniquely their own. The practice of sigillization, popularized by artist and occultist Austin Osman Spare, is a central technique in chaos magic. Sigils are symbols crafted to represent a specific intention or desire. The process involves creating a sigil, charging it with emotional or psychic energy, and then allowing it to sink into the subconscious mind, where it can work its magic unnoticed by the conscious mind. Another critical concept in chaos magic is gnosis, a heightened state of consciousness that is believed to increase the practitioner's ability to influence reality. Gnosis can be achieved through a variety of means, including meditation, chanting, drumming, and even more extreme practices, such as sensory deprivation, physical exhaustion, or other activities. The goal is to bypass the rational mind and reach a state where the magician's will can operate more freely. This mirrors techniques found in other mystical traditions but is stripped of their religious or dogmatic frameworks, allowing the practitioner to remain untethered from any specific system. A defining feature of chaos magic is its embrace of paradigm shifting. Practitioners are encouraged to adopt and discard belief systems as necessary to achieve their magical goals. For instance, practitioners are encouraged to adopt completely different worldviews, depending on something as simple as the roll of a set of dice. For instance, a certain roll could indicate that the practitioner adopts a Norse pagan worldview for 6 months. Another roll, for instance, could have the same person adopting a Christian worldview for the next 6 years. This process, often referred to as belief as a tool, allows the magician to use various cultural or psychological models to shape their reality. The fluidity with which chaos magicians shift their paradigms is both a strength and a source of controversy. Some critics argue that this approach lacks the ethical grounding found in more structured religious, spiritual, and occult traditions. However, advocates of chaos magic argue that its adaptability is precisely what makes it effective in an era where rigid belief systems often fail to accommodate modern life. Fundamentally, chaos magic is an occult system which rejects the existence of absolute truth and further rejects all religious, spiritual, and occult traditions that came before it. Augury was an important part of ancient Roman religion, where people used signs from nature, particularly birds, to understand the will of the gods. Augurs were the religious officials responsible for interpreting these signs. They didn't predict the future in a modern sense, but instead determined if the gods approved of a planned action, like starting a war or electing a new leader. In Rome, birds were seen as messengers of the gods. Augurs would carefully watch how birds flew, sang, or ate to figure out if the gods were sending a good or bad message. There were 2 types of birds used for these interpretations. One type made predictions by how they sang, and the other by how they flew. The practice of taking the auspices often referred to watching birds in this way to understand what the gods wanted. It wasn't just birds that could be signs from the gods. Augurs also interpreted other natural events, like lightning or thunder. Sometimes even small everyday things like sneezing or stumbling could be seen as messages from the gods. These signs were either deliberately sought out by an augur or happened randomly during rituals or public events. Augury wasn't just about religion. It was also a powerful tool in Roman politics. Augurs were involved in all kinds of important public events, from elections to military campaigns. Romans were highly religious and superstitious, and no major public action would happen without getting a yes from the gods. The Romans believed that ignoring the signs could lead to disaster, so the augur's interpretations held a lot of weight. Originally, only the Roman upper class, called patricians, could become augurs. This meant that they controlled what was seen as the will of the gods. Augury followed strict procedures. The augur would stand in a sacred area and use a special curved staff to mark out the space in the sky where they'd watch for signs. This area was considered holy, and within it, the augur believed they could properly connect with the gods and understand their will. Another way augury was practiced was by watching sacred chickens. Yes, you heard me correctly, holy chickens. The augur would watch how these chickens ate. If they ate eagerly and food dropped from their beaks, it was considered a good sign. If they refused to eat, made strange noises, or acted out of the ordinary, displaying unnatural chicken behavior, it was a bad omen. As Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, the practice of augury gradually declined and eventually disappeared. Remote viewing is a phenomenon that claims to allow individuals to perceive and describe information about distant or unseen targets through non-physical means. RV is typically described as extrasensory perception, or sensing with the mind. This concept has intrigued many, drawing both believers and skeptics, and has even garnered attention from government agencies, leading to its study under various secret programs. The formal investigation of remote viewing as a scientific endeavor began in the 20th century, with significant contributions from researchers like Ingo Swann. These researchers were among the first to conduct controlled experiments in remote viewing, particularly under the auspices of the Stanford Research Institute in the early 1970s. One of the most notable early experiments involved the psychic Ingo Swann, who was tested for his ability to describe objects and events located at a distance. These experiments at SRI reportedly yielded positive results, leading to further interest and funding from various branches of the U.S. military and intelligence communities. This period marked the beginning of a more organized and funded approach to studying remote viewing, culminating in the establishment of the Stargate Project. The Stargate Project was a secret U.S. Army unit established in the late 1970s, aimed at exploring the potential military applications of psychic phenomena, including remote viewing. This project, which ran until 1995, was motivated by reports that the Soviet Union was heavily investing in similar research. There was a significant concern that they might develop psychic capabilities that could be used against the United States or American allies. Under the Stargate Project, remote viewers were tasked with various missions, including locating hostages, identifying the locations of weapons, and gathering intelligence on enemy positions. Proponents of the project claimed some successes, such as the alleged remote viewing of a lost Soviet aircraft in 1976. However, the project was fraught with controversy and skepticism, particularly from the scientific community, which criticized the methodologies used and the reliability of the results. One of the primary criticisms is the lack of repeatability in remote viewing experiments. Many studies have reported positive results, but these results often failed to be replicated in subsequent experiments, leading to questions about the validity of the findings. Furthermore, methodological flaws have been pointed out in many of the early remote viewing experiments. Issues such as the possibility of sensory leakage have been raised. This is where the remote viewer could have received unintentional cues about the target tainting the results. These issues have cast doubt on the legitimacy of the results. These concerns have led many in the scientific community to classify remote viewing as pseudoscience, despite its continued popularity among certain groups and researchers. One notable figure in RV is Joseph McMoneagle, a retired U.S. Army officer who participated in the Stargate Project and is often cited as one of the most successful remote viewers. This dude claimed to have been involved in numerous successful remote viewing operations, although these claims are often disputed by skeptics. The Stargate Project's association with remote viewing gave the phenomenon a degree of legitimacy that it might not have achieved otherwise. The project received considerable funding over its two-decade existence, with the Pentagon and the Defense Intelligence Agency both playing a role. However, by the early 1990s, the project's utility was increasingly questioned. Consequently, the CIA terminated the Stargate project in 1995, marking the end of open official U.S. government research into remote viewing. The idea that remote viewing is still an ongoing government research project has persisted as a conspiracy theory for many years, despite the official closure of the Stargate project. Proponents of this theory argue that the U.S. government continued to secretly fund and conduct research into remote viewing, motivated by its potential intelligence applications. One of the central claims supporting this theory is that the public termination of the Stargate project was merely a facade, designed to remove the controversial research from public scrutiny. The rationale behind this theory is that the government would not abandon a project that had any potential strategic value. Particularly, observers have noted that if adversarial nations like Russia or China were believed to be exploring similar research, the U.S. government would not want to allow them any potential edge. Supporters of this theory often cite the secrecy that surrounded the Stargate project and the broader field of remote viewing research. The project was highly classified for many years, and only a fraction of the related documents have been declassified. To quote one of my favorite shows, "I want to believe, but I'm suspicious about this program in general." It's entirely plausible that remote viewing research functioned less as a genuine pursuit of psychic phenomena, and more as a strategic head fake aimed at the U.S.'s adversaries. If the government's real intention was to plant seeds of doubt and paranoia in the minds of rival intelligence agencies, this would have been the best way to do so. Publicizing these secret programs and their supposedly miraculous feats could have been an ingenious ploy. Under this theory, at worst, it was a low-cost psychological operation that sowed just enough confusion to keep adversaries scrambling, even if the science itself never truly held up. In this view, the persistent rumors and conspiracy theories that the project quietly lives on might be its biggest success. Nothing says effective psyop quite like never letting the story die. On June 23, 2021, Daniel Robinson, a 24-year-old field geologist, left his job site near Sun Valley Parkway and Cactus Road in Buckeye, Arizona, at around 9:15 a.m. He drove away in his 2017 Jeep Renegade, heading west into the desert. Later that day, when no one heard from him, he was reported missing. Born without the lower part of his right arm, he still took part in athletics, and after earning a geology degree in 2017, moved to Arizona for work. There, he found a position as a hydrogeologist with Matrix New World. On July 19, 2021, a rancher discovered Daniel's Jeep rolled onto its side in a remote ravine. The airbags had deployed, and the seatbelt showed signs of use. Inside the vehicle were Daniel's cell phone, wallet, keys, and even his clothes. Investigators combed the area for clues, and a human skull found nearby raised hopes of a lead. Curiously, testing soon showed it was not Daniel's, and no other remains were found at that time. The Buckeye Police Department and other agencies used drones, cadaver dogs, and helicopters, covering over 70 square miles in their search. Daniel's family hired a private investigator who believed the scene might have been staged. The investigator noted that the Jeep's ignition had been turned over dozens of times after the airbags deployed, and that an unexplained extra 11 miles were recorded on the odometer. He also found red paint transferred onto Daniel's vehicle, suggesting it had struck another car before ending up in the ravine. A rancher said he had been near that spot 2 days before the Jeep was found and had not seen it then. Back in Tempe, Daniel's apartment was either disturbed or completely ransacked, depending on the source. What is clear is that someone went through his closet and accessed his computer. Forensic analysis showed strange activity, suggesting someone had been browsing his search history without a clear purpose. Police learned Daniel had been texting with a woman he met while making deliveries for Instacart. According to the woman, he visited her home unannounced more than once, making her feel both extremely uncomfortable and threatened. I wasn't able to find any information about whether this woman made any police complaints about this behavior prior to Daniel's disappearance. Adding to the mystery, in November 2021, a second set of remains was found, and again testing showed they did not belong to Daniel. The speculation around Daniel's disappearance has been considerable. One theory revolves around the possibility of a tragic accident, where Daniel may have got into an accident, suffered a head injury, become disoriented, and perished due to exposure. Another theory centers on foul play by an unknown party, triggered by events either at the remote job site or in the days leading up to Daniel's disappearance. According to some, the anomalies with the Jeep's ignition, the presence of red paint suggesting a collision, and a suspiciously staged crash scene all hint at an orchestrated cover-up. Under this scenario, someone might have harmed Daniel and then accessed his apartment, though the reasoning for doing all this is a mystery. A third angle involves the possibility of a voluntary disappearance, potentially due to personal struggles or emotional distress. The odd activity in his apartment and on his computer could represent a hastily executed plan to leave his old life behind. Daniel Robinson remains missing, and the Buckeye PD is still investigating the matter. If you have any information regarding the case, please contact them. The story of the Isdal woman begins on a cold November afternoon in 1970 when a man and his two daughters were hiking in Isdalen, a rugged valley with a reputation for past hiking accidents. They stumbled upon something horrifying: the charred remains of a woman lying between large rocks. The body was found on November 29, 1970, and local police were quickly called to the scene. The initial examination suggested she had been dead for a few days. Her clothes had their labels removed, and any personal belongings that might have identified her were systematically stripped of distinguishing marks. Authorities soon realized that the woman had ingested a large amount of sleeping pills and had suffered burns on her body. However, they weren't able to determine if she caused these injuries and conditions, or if it was done by someone else. The police began a meticulous investigation, but every lead seemed to provoke more confusion. A few days after the discovery, 2 suitcases were linked to the Isdal woman and recovered from a luggage storage facility at the Bergen railway station. Inside these cases, investigators found a strange assortment of items: wigs, clothing with all labels removed, and a pair of glasses. Crucially, they also found a coded note that appeared to reference the places she had traveled. Also puzzling was the fact that the woman had used multiple passports under different names, all false, during her stay in Norway. The attempt to determine her true identity through traditional means, such as fingerprint comparisons, failed to yield any matches in international databases. The Norwegian police eventually concluded that the Isdal woman's death might have been a self-deletion, pointing to the overdose and the somewhat bizarre nature of her preparedness. Yet many have disputed this conclusion over the years. Why would a woman traveling under multiple aliases remove the labels from her clothing and carry wigs? Why encode notes about her journey if she had no reason to hide her movements? And who was she meeting, if anyone, in the remote valley where her body was found? These questions have fueled speculation that she may have been involved in the clandestine world of espionage. The Cold War was still in full swing at the time of her death, and Bergen, a strategic point along Norway's coast, was not immune to international intrigue. One theory suggests that the Isdal woman was a spy, potentially working for a Warsaw Pact country on a mission to observe NATO maneuvers. This theory attempts to explain her multiple identities, her coded travel note, and her generally suspicious behavior. If she was indeed a spy, it's possible that her death was meant to ensure her permanent silence. Alternatively, it's possible that her mission failed, or she felt the pressure of imminent capture and chose to go out on her own. None of these espionage theories, however, have been proven, and critics argue that the spy narrative is largely circumstantial and based on inference rather than direct evidence. Another theory suggests she might have been involved in criminal activities, such as smuggling or dealing in stolen goods. People have pointed out that the lack of identification marks on her belongings and the multiple passports might indicate a life lived on the fringes of legality. In recent decades, scientific advancements have spurred new attempts to solve the mystery. The Norwegian police and forensic experts have re-examined the case using modern DNA analysis, isotope testing, and advanced facial reconstructions. Isotope analysis of her teeth indicated that she might have grown up in or near the border regions between France and Germany, or possibly somewhere in Central Europe. Robert William Fisher, born on April 13, 1961, is a fugitive wanted for the slayings of his wife and 2 children, followed by the arson of their Scottsdale, Arizona home in April 2001. Despite extensive manhunts and being on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list for nearly 2 decades, Fisher's whereabouts remain unknown. Fisher served in the U.S. Navy and later worked as a firefighter and in the medical field. In 1987, he married Mary Cooper, and the couple had 2 children, Bobby and Brittany. Their domestic life was reportedly troubled, with friends noting Fisher's controlling behavior and marital discord. In 1998, Fisher admitted to an extramarital affair, which strained the marriage further. Mary reportedly considered divorce, a prospect that deeply unsettled Fisher due to his own parents' divorce during his childhood. On April 10, 2001, the Fisher family home exploded in a massive fire. Firefighters responding to the scene discovered the bodies of Mary, 38, and their 2 children, 12-year-old Brittany and 10-year-old Bobby, in their beds. Autopsies revealed that all 3 had been slain prior to the fire starting. Investigators determined that the fire was deliberately set using an accelerant and a severed gas line, likely ignited by a candle to delay the explosion. Robert was immediately identified as the primary suspect. He was last seen on an ATM surveillance camera on April 9, 2001, withdrawing $280. 10 days after the murders, Mary's Toyota 4Runner was found in a remote area of the Tonto National Forest near Payson, Arizona. The family's dog, Blue, was found nearby, but there was no trace of Fisher. Despite extensive searches, including cave systems and surrounding wilderness, no definitive evidence of Fisher's whereabouts was uncovered. Several theories have emerged regarding Fisher's fate in the years that followed. Some investigators believe Fisher may have deleted himself from existence in the forested areas near where his vehicle was found. Fisher is often speculated to possess survivalist skills, a theory supported by his background and interests. Fisher served in the U.S. Navy, where he would have received training in basic survival techniques, discipline, and adaptability. Additionally, he was an avid outdoorsman who reportedly enjoyed hunting, fishing, and hiking in rugged terrains, particularly in Arizona's wilderness. His familiarity with the Tonto National Forest, near where the abandoned vehicle was discovered, suggests he might have chosen the area deliberately, knowing its landscape could hinder the search. Fisher's ability to remain undetected for over 2 decades has fueled speculation that he may be leveraging these capabilities to live off-grid. That said, there's no direct evidence nor even strong circumstantial evidence confirming that he has survived in the wilderness. Another theory suggests Fisher may have had help from friends or acquaintances, enabling him to evade capture. Under this theory, one of these friends may have helped him acquire a new identity or even flee the country. If he stayed in the country and isn't living off the grid, some have speculated that he may be living on the outskirts of life as a drifter doing odd jobs. However, no concrete evidence supports this, and those close to him have consistently denied any involvement. That said, there have been reports of a man resembling Fisher in Guatemala who may have married a woman there, though this doesn't appear to have been fully investigated as yet. In November 2021, after 20 years, Fisher was removed from the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, though he remains a wanted fugitive. The decision was based on the duration of his inclusion and the lack of new information leading to his capture. If you have any information regarding Robert Fisher, please report it to the FBI. Hey everyone, it's your boy Jimmy here with a quick reminder to like, subscribe, and share the video. On January 13, 2018, residents and visitors in Hawaii experienced a harrowing 38 minutes after receiving an emergency alert warning of an incoming ballistic missile. The message, which appeared on smartphones statewide, read, "Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill." The official story behind this event is deceptively simple. The alert was a false alarm, triggered inadvertently during a routine internal test at the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. An employee mistakenly selected the live alert option instead of the test, sending the terrifying message across the state. Despite immediate recognition of the error, it took 38 minutes to issue a correction, during which widespread panic ensued. The incident occurred amid heightened tensions between the United States and North Korea, with the latter conducting missile tests and making aggressive statements. This context amplified the fear and confusion caused by the false alert, as many believed a missile attack was plausible. In the aftermath, several conspiracy theories emerged. Some speculated that the alert was not accidental, but a deliberate psychological experiment by the government to gauge public reaction to a missile threat. Others suggested it was a cover-up for a real missile intercepted by defense systems. The ivory-billed woodpecker once inhabited the old-growth forests of the southeastern United States, where it fed on delicious beetle larvae lurking beneath the bark of dead and dying trees. I mean delicious if you're an IBW, of course. And yeah, I'm calling them IBWs from now on. And yeah, there's timestamps if you don't want to be subjected to that. Historically, it was one of the largest woodpeckers in North America, second only to the imperial woodpecker of Mexico. Unfortunately, the IBW's numbers began to dwindle during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, mostly due to rampant deforestation and logging that stripped away their old-growth habitats. By the early mid-20th century, the species had become incredibly rare, and confirmed sightings nearly vanished. The last widely accepted photographic records came from the Singer Tract in Louisiana during the late 1930s and early 1940s. By the late 20th century, most ornithologists agreed that the IBW was likely extinct, though some individual reports persisted. Various unverified sightings popped up in Florida, Louisiana, and elsewhere, fueling occasional newspaper headlines and speculation among bird enthusiasts and conservationists. A pivotal moment came in 2004 when members of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and other researchers reported a possible sighting in the Big Woods area of eastern Arkansas. The announcement sparked international excitement and led to significant funding and publicity for large-scale searches. However, subsequent evidence, based primarily on inconclusive video footage and fleeting visual encounters, failed to meet the rigorous standards needed for undeniable verification. While these efforts strengthened conservation measures in the region, the absence of irrefutable documentation meant that many scientists remained skeptical. Some critics argued that the search's resources might have been better spent protecting currently confirmed endangered species. Others speculated that the quote-unquote IBW sighting was actually cooked up by conservationists who wanted to strengthen conservation efforts in the area in general. Despite occasional unverified sightings, the bird is now widely classified as either critically endangered or presumed extinct. The Kensington runestone is a controversial artifact that was allegedly discovered by a Swedish immigrant, Olof Öhman, in 1898 on his farm near Kensington, Minnesota. It's a slab of stone about 30 inches high, 16 inches wide, and 6 inches thick, inscribed with runes that some have claimed date back to the 14th century. The stone's inscription, if authentic, would suggest that Norse explorers reached what is now the Midwestern United States long before Columbus. The stone's authenticity has been hotly debated for more than a century, and it's still not widely accepted among professional archaeologists or historians. At first glance, the inscription on the Kensington runestone seems to tell a story of a group of Norse explorers. These intrepid Norsemen, in 1362, reached the interior of North America, lost a number of their men, and left the stone as a memorial. According to this narrative, these explorers were part of a larger expedition that may have ventured deep into the continent via inland waterways. This would be a remarkable piece of evidence for pre-Columbian exploration of the region, lending support to the idea that Vikings navigated far beyond known coastal areas. Yet from the very moment it was brought to public attention, skepticism surrounded its origin, style, and language. The runic inscription, as translated, reads something like a casualty record combined with directions and a date. If we accept it at face value, it indicates that a group of 30 explorers made their way deep into the continent, only to face disaster. However, experts have long questioned the grammar, spelling, and word choices seen in the runes. Linguists argue that some words used in the inscription are more consistent with 19th century Scandinavian dialects rather than medieval ones. In other words, the language doesn't neatly match the patterns we'd expect from genuine 14th century runes. Additionally, there's the matter of weathering and tool marks. Professional geologists who've examined the stone have had differing opinions. Some have argued that the inscription's weathering patterns match a centuries-old carving. Others, however, have claimed that the stone's inscription shows signs of having been made relatively recently, possibly around the time of its, quote, discovery in the late 19th century. Further complicating things is the social and cultural context of late 19th century rural Minnesota. Many Scandinavian immigrants who settled in the region were proud of their heritage and eager to discover evidence that connected them to the land's distant past. The Kensington runestone emerged at a time when such an artifact could generate immense local interest, perhaps even tourism and prestige. Some historians have suggested that a hoax could have been born from a desire to create a grand narrative tying Norse history to the American heartland where these Scandinavians had settled. Over the years, many attempts have been made to prove or disprove the stone's authenticity. In the scholarly world, the overwhelming majority opinion tends toward the stone being a 19th century forgery. Mainstream historians cite linguistic anachronisms, the context of its discovery, and the lack of corroborating archaeological evidence as reasons to doubt its authenticity. They argue that in the absence of solid evidence, the simplest explanation, namely that it's a clever hoax, is the best one. Now that I've presented the competing arguments on this one, I'm going to jump in and give my take on this runestone more directly than I do for most entries in this series. There's no evidence for any runestones being raised beyond the 12th century. A runestone being raised in the 14th century would be a significant historical anomaly, as it simply wasn't a practice that had persisted until that point. The Ningen is an Antarctic humanoid cryptid that emerged from Japanese folklore in the mid-2000s. The legend of the Ningen began around 2007, following a post on the Japanese online forum 2chan. The post claimed that crew members of a whale research ship had witnessed a mysterious creature surfacing near their vessel off the Antarctic coast. Initially mistaking it for a submarine, they approached, only for the quote-unquote submarine to vanish into the depths. This account sparked widespread interest and speculation, leading to various alleged sightings and discussions across the internet. Notably, from the beginning, descriptions of the Ningen haven't been very consistent. However, it's generally depicted as a large, aquatic, whale-like creature with human anatomical features, such as a distinct humanoid face. Some accounts describe it with extremely large limbs, arms, and hands, measuring between 20 to 30 meters in length. Less common descriptions portray it as a smaller terrestrial organism with a large head on humanoid legs, wandering Antarctica. The creature is typically described as pale blue, with a large slit-like mouth and either small or large gaping eyes. Both of these creatures are called Ningen, which I suppose makes it the Japanese equivalent of the chupacabra, where two distinct cryptids have the same name and confused lore. Further intrigue arose in 2010 when the Japanese Enoshima Aquarium released a YouTube video showcasing ocean life. Near the video's end, a large figure with small eyes and a broad, smiling mouth appeared on the ocean floor. Also, if you're just listening to my video, you may want to turn your attention to the screen right now, since I've got this clip lined up, and I've got to admit it's kind of weird.
Coincidence? I think not.
Wait, how did that get in there? Let's just keep that between us, okay? Anyway, here's the proper clip. Some claimed this was evidence of the Ningen, but others suggested it was a snaggle-toothed snake eel or an unusual rock formation. Several theories surround the Ningen and what it is, if anything at all. The most likely theory is, of course, that the Ningen is simply an internet urban legend, which took on a life of its own, outside the context of the board where it was posted. Others have speculated that Ningen sightings are known marine animals seen in unusual places, or by people unfamiliar with them but familiar with Ningen lore. So yeah, anyway, that's it. This is part 96 of this series, so check out my channel if you haven't already. Peace out, everyone. The so-called Sandown Clown Encounter is a most peculiar encounter which took place on May 1973 near Lake Common in Sandown, on the Isle of Wight. According to the primary account, the two children were on holiday and exploring the area around Lake Common. While they were exploring, they heard a strange wailing sound, similar to the buzzing of an ambulance siren, echoing through the countryside. Intrigued, they followed the noise until they reached a small footbridge spanning a narrow stream. There, they encountered what they later described as a clown. Though its appearance went far beyond the typical bright colors and face paint one might associate with circus performers. The figure was said to stand about 7 feet tall, with what appeared to be a misfitting or oversized head. Its face was a mix of human and mechanical traits, featuring triangular markings on its cheeks and distinctive fringes of hair. One of the most unusual details the children recounted was that the clown seemed to be fumbling with a microphone-like device, from which it occasionally emitted the odd wailing noise. The entity was dressed in a pointed hat, featuring what they remembered as a yellowish top, and wore a long-sleeved outfit that hung loosely from its gangly frame. It apparently had 3 fingers on each hand and moved in a somewhat jerky or robotic fashion. At one point, the clown dropped the microphone, which produced a loud splash in the nearby water, and then the device seemed to stop transmitting the wailing sound. Despite its rather unsettling appearance, the clown didn't appear overtly threatening. According to their later statements, the clown's speech was muffled as though he was talking through a device or from behind a mask. Nevertheless, they managed to communicate. The children asked if he was a ghost. The clown allegedly replied, "Well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way." He also mentioned that his name was Sam, and that his name was all colors, whatever that means in the context. He may have also stated that people refer to him in different ways, though the accounts vary. During the conversation, the clown reportedly invited the children to enter a nearby metal hut or structure that might have served as his temporary dwelling. Also, I'm just gonna say, when the creepy 7-foot-tall clown-like entity tells you to enter a weird metallic hut, don't walk. Run in the opposite direction of the hut. At any rate, the kids didn't take this advice and decided to follow the entity to the hut. Accounts suggest that the interior of this hut was no larger than a small room, filled with rudimentary furniture, including a basic chair and a table. Those who believe the clown was a homeless person wearing an unusual costume believe this ramshackle dwelling is a key piece of evidence in favor of their preferred theory. The clown proceeded to make them some sort of beverage, though sources differ on whether it was water or a different liquid. Whatever the case, the children later noted that there was nothing outright sinister in the clown's gestures, but the entire experience was surreal. After the encounter, the children retreated and later shared their story, which eventually found its way to a British UFO Research Association and other paranormal investigative communities. One thing that's always been unclear to me about this story is who put the children in contact with these research groups and why. Unfortunately, the sources we have don't provide any clear answer on this. Was it the parents wanting answers? The authorities? The peculiar nature of the alleged entity, a robot clown seemingly partial to speaking in riddles, captured attention. Some interpreted it as a possible alien visitor. Others suggested it was an eccentric individual in a bizarre costume. Others argued that the children either concocted the story or misremembered a local performer. Yet, none of these explanations seem to account for all the details, especially the clown's height, the unusual hut, and the cryptic dialogue. Skeptics have pointed out that children can be prone to exaggeration and imagination. They argue that the kids might have encountered a traveling entertainer who had set up a temporary structure for his show, or perhaps a very unconventional homeless person. Believers in the paranormal highlight the depth of the children's descriptions and the consistent weirdness in every facet of the account. Some have suggested that the clown was a time traveler who was giving a message to the children. Others have suggested that it was a ghost, a demon, a fairy, or some other sort of folkloric creature which the children misinterpreted as a clown. My personal theory on this one is that the kids made up an interesting story about a weird encounter. Kids love to imagine weird and wonderful things. When adults started taking the story seriously, the kids naturally just kept building upon it, again, as kids like to do. All that said, it's a cool, eerie encounter, and I'm happy it's entered the canon of weird and mysterious stories. On October 1st, 2015, at approximately 2 a.m., 37-year-old Clinton Yao Fu was slain outside a residence on Kingston Road, near Ellesmere Road in Toronto. Responding to a 911 call, police discovered Yao Fu suffering from bullet wounds. Despite life-saving efforts, he was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation revealed that Yao Fu was killed by a single shot from a high-powered weapon. fired from a considerable distance. The shooter demonstrated significant skill, executing the shot at night under challenging conditions, including darkness and wind, all while the victim was moving. A distinctive Browning weapon was recovered approximately 200 yards from the crime scene. Investigators traced it to Montreal, suggesting a potential connection between the perpetrator and that region. Yao Fu had a history of involvement in organized crime. In 2009, he was implicated in a significant substance and weapons bust following a Mr. Big sting operation, which led to his arrest. This is a kind of operation, legal in Canada, where the police pretend to represent a powerful crime lord, getting someone to commit to increasingly serious offenses. This criminal background has led investigators to consider the possibility that his slaying was a targeted act related to his past activities. The method of the slaying, a sniper attack, was highly unusual for Toronto, indicating a level of planning and expertise not commonly seen in the city's criminal cases. Despite extensive investigations, including appeals for information from the public and extensive use of social media campaigns, the case remains unsolved. The prevailing theory on this slaying is that Yao Fu was targeted and eliminated by a powerful crime syndicate. This theory gained substantially more traction when no more attacks of this nature occurred, suggesting that this was in no way a random crime. The Toronto Police Service continues to seek any information that could lead to the identification and apprehension of the individual responsible for this slaying. The Westall UFO incident occurred on April 6, 1966, in the Melbourne suburb of Westall in Australia. What makes this case particularly intriguing is the sheer number of witnesses. Over 200 students, teachers, and nearby residents observed the phenomenon. The event unfolded during the late morning at around 11 a.m., when students and staff from Westall High School and Westall State School spotted a strange object in the sky. The object was described as a gray, saucer-shaped craft with a dome on top. According to witnesses, it hovered silently over the school grounds and surrounding fields for several minutes. Some reports indicate that the craft changed shape, stretching into an elongated form before returning to its saucer-like appearance. After hovering, the object reportedly shot off at high speed, disappearing into the sky. Witnesses recall seeing not only the primary object, but also two smaller UFOs that accompanied it. The scene became even more dramatic when 5 small airplanes, possibly civilian or military, were seen circling the area, seemingly pursuing the UFOs. These planes, however, were left behind as the UFOs moved at speeds far greater than the aircraft could match. Some students and teachers ventured beyond the school grounds to an open area called the Grange, where the UFO had appeared to descend. According to these individuals, they found a large circular patch of flattened grass, roughly 12 meters in diameter, in the location where the object was thought to have landed. The grass within the circle was swirled in a particular direction, and there were no tracks or signs of human or vehicle interference. The response from authorities and the school's administration was swift and unusual. The headmaster of Westall High School, Frank Sambleby, held an assembly later that day to downplay the incident. He told the students that they had not seen anything significant and instructed them not to discuss the matter further, especially with the media, which had already begun gathering outside the school. Several students recall seeing men in suits at the assembly, presumed to be government officials, who reinforced this message. This unusual reaction raised suspicions of a cover-up, especially as some students reported being directly approached and intimidated by these mysterious individuals. Despite these efforts to silence the witnesses, the Westall incident has remained a subject of public interest and UFO research. Over the years, various explanations have been proposed, though none has conclusively solved the mystery. One skeptical theory suggests that the UFO was a high altitude weather balloon released during a joint Australian American program aimed at monitoring radiation levels following nuclear tests. These skeptics suggest that there is evidence that a runaway balloon might have drifted over the area that day, and its silver, dome like appearance could match some descriptions of the UFO. However, many witnesses have rejected this explanation, citing the extraordinary speed and maneuverability of the object, as well as its sudden disappearance. These are characteristics which are naturally inconsistent with the behavior of a balloon. Others have speculated that the object could have been a secret military aircraft, either from the Royal Australian Air Force or the United States Air Force, possibly as test flights. Given the Cold War context and the proximity of Westall to a military base, this theory has gained some traction, though it remains unproven. The Bridgewater Triangle is a roughly 200 square mile region in southeastern Massachusetts that's said to be a hotspot for paranormal activity and unexplained phenomena. Its boundaries are typically drawn to include the towns of Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown, though surrounding areas often get swept into the legend. The concept was first proposed by American cryptozoologist Loren Coleman, who introduced the term Bridgewater Triangle in his 1983 book, Mysterious America. Coleman's interest in this region was sparked by a series of unusual accounts he'd gathered while researching alleged cryptid and paranormal encounters in New England. He noted that many unexplained incidents occurred within the same geographical area, and so he decided to outline that region as a kind of paranormal triangle. Although Coleman's original focus was on cryptozoological creatures, subsequent investigations have focused heavily on supernatural phenomena. Also, I've just got to editorialize here for a second. Why do supernatural areas always have to be triangles? Why can't we have a spooky rhombus? One of the most famous features of the Bridgewater Triangle is the Hockomock Swamp. Hockomock is an Algonquin word, meaning the place where spirits dwell, which indicates that it was viewed as a sacred and potentially spooky space long prior to European arrival. The swamp is a fairly vast and protected wetland known for its dense vegetation and diverse wildlife. Yet many people claim the swamp is also home to ghostly orbs of light and sightings of mysterious creatures. Whether it's just the region's remoteness or something more, Hockomock Swamp has become central to the Bridgewater Triangle's reputation. Another notable site within the triangle is Dighton Rock, located in the Taunton River. This 40-ton boulder is covered in petroglyphs and has been the subject of speculation for centuries. Various theories about the rock's carvings have pointed to everything from Portuguese explorers to Native American tribes, but no definitive origin has been established. For those who believe the triangle is a focus of high strangeness, Dighton Rock's enduring mystery fits neatly into the region's broader narrative of unexplained events. Over the years, local residents and visitors alike have reported seeing UFOs, spectral lights, and even giant birds in the region. Some claim they've heard eerie sounds echoing through the woods late at night, while others say they've seen large black dogs crossing roads and disappearing into thin air. These dog-like creatures are speculated by some to be skinwalker-like entities roaming the region. Law enforcement officers have occasionally spoken about odd occurrences in the region, but there's usually no official explanation offered for these strange accounts. Skeptics argue that the Bridgewater Triangle's notoriety is more a result of legend building and media hype than actual evidence of paranormal activity. They point out that many of the triangle's ghost stories and creature sightings could simply be misidentified wildlife, hoaxes, or folklore repeated over time. Yet, the lasting appeal of the Bridgewater Triangle might lie in its ability to capture people's imaginations. After all, New England has a long history of mysterious tales, and the region's dense forests and swamplands set the perfect stage for unsettling encounters. Anyway, I'm curious if this area has a spooky reputation to locals as well, so leave a comment if you're from the area. Hey, it's Jimmy here with a huge shout out to my subscribers, patrons, and YouTube members. Thanks for making this all possible. The Capitol Hill Mystery Soda Machine was a beloved oddity that captivated the hearts of locals and tourists alike in Seattle, Washington. It was located on the corner of East John Street and 10th Avenue East in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. This battered old vending machine became infamous for dispensing random soda flavors for just 75 cents. Although its exact origins remain unknown, most accounts suggest it appeared sometime in the 1990s, quietly standing outside a locksmith's shop. From a distance, the machine looked unremarkable, just another relic of a bygone era of old soda machines. Up close, however, you'd notice a missing brand label, faded paint, and buttons bearing cryptic question marks instead of the usual logos. When customers pushed those question mark buttons, the machine often dispensed rare or discontinued soda flavors. No one was quite sure who stocked the machine or how it was maintained. There were rumors that a mysterious caretaker quietly slipped by under the cover of darkness to refill it with random drinks. Some said it was a local business owner who enjoyed the sense of community the machine provided. Others believed it was a secret society dedicated to preserving forgotten soda flavors. Still others suggested it might be an elaborate publicity stunt by a beverage company to get media and later social media talking about their weird discontinued flavors. Despite countless theories, no one ever came forward claiming responsibility for the Capitol Hill Mystery Soda Machine's upkeep. By the mid-2000s, the vending machine's legend had spread well beyond Seattle. Visitors from across the country made special pilgrimages to Capitol Hill just to see it for themselves and try their luck with the random soda selection. Photos and videos started popping up on YouTube, fueling its internet fame. Travel bloggers and journalists wrote features about the machine's quirky charm, and it soon became a minor celebrity in its own right. In June 2018, the machine vanished without warning, and a note was left indicating that it went for a walk. Speculation ran wild, with some people lamenting the end of a cherished tradition, and others suspecting it was yet another clever twist in the machine's ongoing story. Shortly after its disappearance, a photo appeared on the machine's unofficial Facebook page, claiming that it had gone on vacation. The soda machine has since appeared in a variety of photoshopped images picturing it in various locations, but the machine itself appears to have yet to resurface. And you'll notice I said appears there since I was able to find one reference on Reddit that it may have briefly appeared in Shoreline, another city in Washington, in 2022. That said, I wasn't able to find any pictures of this reappearance, and I'm not entirely sure this isn't just a rumor. The Dover Demon is a mysterious creature that reportedly appeared in Dover, Massachusetts, over a 2-day span in April 1977. The sightings involved a small group of teenagers who described a bizarre, humanoid figure with a large head and glowing eyes. Although the sightings were brief and localized, they've generated enduring interest and spawned multiple theories about what truly happened in the woods. The first reported sighting took place on the night of April 21st, 1977, around 10:30 p.m. 17-year-old Bill Bartlett was driving down Farm Street with friends when he noticed a strange figure clinging to a stone wall by the side of the road. Bartlett described the creature as having a disproportionately large head, shaped like a watermelon, glowing orange eyes, and spindly limbs. He also noted that it appeared to lack prominent facial features, like a nose or mouth. Though the encounter lasted only a few seconds, Bartlett quickly told his friends what he'd seen, and he later sketched a drawing of the creature that has since become iconic. Later that same night, around midnight, 15-year-old John Baxter was walking along Miller Hill Road after leaving his girlfriend's house. He claimed he spotted a small figure in the distance, initially believing it to be a friend or another person. As he got closer, he realized it wasn't a human at all, but something far stranger, an unfamiliar shape that stood awkwardly on two legs. Baxter followed the being for a short distance until it darted away, disappearing into a gully. Baxter's account was remarkably similar to Bartlett's, mentioning the Dover demon's unusual body proportions and large head. Like Bartlett, he also made a sketch of the creature, which aligned closely with Bartlett's depiction. A third sighting occurred the following evening when a teenage couple, Abby Brabham and Will Tainter, claimed they saw a creature fitting the same description. According to them, the being was small and pale, with glowing eyes and no noticeable nose, ears, or mouth. This third account solidified the mystery surrounding Dover. The sightings all happened in close proximity, both in time and geographic location, further supporting the credibility of the teenagers' claims. Despite the intriguing similarities, there's still no definitive explanation for what they actually encountered. In the days following these strange encounters, word of the Dover demon spread around town, and then throughout the world via media reports. Skeptics offered various explanations for the sightings. Some suggested that the Dover demon could have been a baby moose or a newborn calf wandering the outskirts of Dover. However, believers pointed out that the sightings took place in April, and it was unlikely for a moose calf, typically born in May or June, to be roaming around so early. Others proposed an escaped monkey or another form of exotic pet. Yet none of these theories fully account for the demon's distinct features, notably its elongated limbs, huge head, and glowing eyes. A particular popular theory revolves around the Dover demon being some sort of extraterrestrial or interdimensional being. This theory is bolstered by the fact that the creature appears to resemble traditional depictions of a gray alien. Still others propose that it was an initial owl misidentification combined with a brief period of hysteria sweeping the town. For any longtime fans of my channel, you'll know that I always favor the owl hypothesis. Seriously, owls look incredibly creepy and alien at night when you're alone in the woods, and they can fly and chase you even through thick tree cover at night. In the summer of 1988, Keith Reinhard, a 50-year-old sports writer from the Chicago area, sought a change from his routine life. He took a 3-month leave of absence from his job at the Daily Herald and relocated to Silver Plume, Colorado, a quaint town nestled in the Rocky Mountains. His objectives were clear: to overcome his fear of heights through mountain climbing, to get in shape, and to write a novel. To support himself during this period, and to just generally keep busy, he decided to open up an antique shop. He did this in a space that had previously housed a bookstore run by Tom Young, a local man who had mysteriously disappeared the year before. Reinhard became intrigued by Young's disappearance. Tom Young had vanished on September 7, 1987, along with his dog Gus. Nearly a year later, in July 1988, hunters discovered their remains in the mountains near Silver Plume. Both had died from bullet wounds to the head, and a weapon was found at the scene. Authorities ruled Young's death voluntary, though some locals doubted this conclusion, noting that Young was extremely fond of Gus and wouldn't have harmed him. Fascinated by the circumstances, Reinhard decided to base his novel on Young's story. He created a character named Guy Gypsum, a composite of himself and Young, and immersed himself in researching the case, speaking with townspeople who had known Young. This deep dive into Young's life seemed to blur the lines between Reinhard's reality and his fiction. On August 7, 1988, just a week after Young's remains were found, Reinhard closed his shop and told friends he planned to hike to the summit of Pendleton Mountain. Notably, this hike is a challenging endeavor requiring several hours. Despite the late hour, around 4:30 p.m., and his lack of proper hiking gear, he set off alone. Witnesses noted that he was wearing casual clothing and tennis shoes, unsuitable for such a trek, and carried no supplies. He mentioned he would return by 10 p.m., but he never did. A massive search operation ensued, involving over 100 personnel, helicopters, and trained dogs. The search was hampered by difficult terrain and yielded no trace of Reinhard. Tragically, during the search, a Cessna aircraft assisting in the efforts crashed, resulting in the pilot's death and serious injury to the spotter. After a week, the search was called off without any leads. Reinhard's disappearance has spurred various theories. Some suggest he may have met with foul play, possibly uncovering information about Young's death that put him at risk. Others speculate that he staged his own disappearance, influenced by the character in his novel and a desire to start anew. And remember when I mentioned that a pilot perished while conducting a search and rescue operation? Well, according to this theory, the reason why Reinhard never resurfaced in any capacity was because of potential civil liability for this pilot's death. However, his family and friends dispute a voluntary disappearance, claiming that he was content with his life and maintained regular contact with loved ones. Another theory posits that Reinhard fell victim to an accident during his hike. Given his fear of heights and the treacherous terrain, it's plausible he could have suffered a fatal fall. Yet, the exhaustive search yielded no physical evidence to support this, though of course that isn't to say the evidence didn't exist out in the wilderness, just that it wasn't found. The coincidences between Reinhard and Young's cases are striking. Both men rented the same shop space, both disappeared in the mountains near Silver Plume, and Reinhard was writing a novel about Young at the time of his own disappearance. Despite extensive investigations, no conclusive evidence has emerged to explain Reinhard's fate. His case remains open, leaving a lingering mystery that continues to haunt the small town of Silver Plume. In my view, the timeline on this case is almost too unusual to be solely coincidental. Just a week after this grim discovery of Young, Reinhard disappeared. Some suggest Reinhard may have uncovered sensitive information that endangered him. However, others argue that the psychological impact of Young's death led Reinhard into a dangerous situation, whether by accident or design. And to put things in perspective here, Reinhard had become so obsessed with Young and his disappearance that he created a fictional character that melded his personality onto Young. To speculate a little bit here, there seems to be the serious potential that this finding destabilized Reinhard, potentially causing him to take a poorly planned out hiking trip. In July 2015, news broke that the skull of F.W. Murnau, the visionary director behind the 1922 silent film Nosferatu, had been stolen from his grave. His adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula resulted in Nosferatu, a symphony of horror, a film that has since become a cornerstone of horror cinema. Due to both copyright issues and the desire to localize the narrative for a German-speaking audience, character names and settings were altered. Count Dracula became Count Orlok, and the setting shifted from Transylvania to the fictional German town of Visborg. This version of Dracula has captivated audiences for over a century, with the most recent reimagining of the film release on Christmas Day 2024. But yeah, let's get back to the mystery itself. The theft of Murnau's skull was discovered by cemetery staff, who noted that his metal coffin had been disturbed and his head removed. Curiously, the graves of his brothers, buried alongside him, remained untouched. Investigators found wax residue at the scene, suggesting that candles had been used, possibly indicating an occult ritual. This theory, while unconfirmed, added a layer of macabre intrigue to the incident. This wasn't the first time the grave had been violated. Reports indicate that his tomb was previously disturbed in the 1970s and again in February 2015, raising questions about why this problem persisted. Notably, the production of the 1922 film is surrounded in occult activity itself. The film's producer, Albin Grau, was an occultist who claimed that the inspiration for the film came from a Serbian farmer who believed his father was a vampire. According to interviews, Grau had extensive conversations with this man while he was stationed in Serbia during the war. This connection to the supernatural, combined with the film's eerie aesthetic, has led to speculation that the movie is cursed or linked to dark forces. Further, some have speculated that Max Schreck, the actor who played Nosferatu, was a vampire himself. That said, it's worth noting that the most likely explanation is that these spooky elements were played up upon the film's release in an attempt to drum up hype. Also, Albin Grau was apparently known to have a pretty active imagination, and no direct evidence of his contact with the Serbian farmer was ever produced, calling that narrative into question. The theft of Murnau's skull remains unsolved, and as of now, there's been no official updates on the status of the investigation in nearly a decade. In 1988, an unidentified serial perpetrator is believed to have slain at least 9 women and caused the disappearances of 2 others in Massachusetts. This individual has become known to law enforcement and the general public as the New Bedford Highway Killer. The victims were primarily companionship workers struggling with addiction and were discovered along and around major highways, notably Interstate 195 and Route 140. Robin Rhodes, 29, is believed to have gone missing sometime in March or April 1988. She was eventually discovered on March 28, 1989, along Massachusetts Route 140 southbound in Freetown by a search dog. Unlike most of the other women, she was not known to be involved in illicit activities, though she was known to associate with people who were. Rochelle Doparala, 28, disappeared sometime during late April 1988. On December 10, 1988, her body was discovered by people riding ATVs in a gravel pit along Reed Road, about 2 miles from Interstate 195. In May 1988, 25-year-old Deborah Lynn McConnell of Newport was last seen by her father following her mother's funeral. She is considered to be the 3rd victim. A cadaver dog found her body on December 1st, 1988, off Massachusetts Route 140 northbound in Freetown. On May 27, 1988, 29-year-old Deborah Medeiros of Fall River was reported missing after a fight with her boyfriend in New Bedford. Although Deborah's boyfriend was initially a person of interest, he was ruled out as a suspect. 19-year-old Christina Montero was last seen sometime in May 1988. She's not been heard from since, though according to authorities she's presumed deceased. It's unclear why authorities believe this. However, given that this is an active, ongoing investigation, evidence is released on a need-to-know basis. Marilyn Cardoza Roberts, 34, was last seen sometime in June 1988 and was reported missing in December 1988. She lived near Christina Montero and, like Montero, remains missing to this day. Also, like Montero, she's presumed deceased with no indication given as to why this is the case. 36-year-old Nancy Lee Paiva of New Bedford was last seen walking home from Whispers Pub on July 7, 1988, following an argument with her boyfriend in the early hours. Her body was found on July 30, 1988, beside Interstate 195 in Dartmouth, lying on her back, with her feet pointed toward the highway. Authorities noted that the staging of her body was similar to how Deborah Medeiros was discovered, suggesting the same perpetrator. Naturally, her boyfriend was initially considered a suspect, but was eventually cleared of all suspicion. On July 11th, 1988, 35-year-old Deborah Greenlaw DeMello was last seen in New Bedford. Her body was discovered on November 8th, 1988, off the eastbound Reed Road ramp of Interstate 195 by a highway crew. Her clothing was scattered among tree branches, and she was found in possession of some of Nancy Paiva's belongings. 26-year-old Mary Rose Santos, from New Bedford, was dropped off near the downtown bus station on July 16, 1988, by her husband. She was last seen dancing at the old quarterdeck lounge about 5 hours later. Her body was eventually discovered on March 31, 1989, along Massachusetts Route 88 in Westport by two boys. Sandra Botello, 24, reportedly left her apartment at 11 p.m. on August 11, 1988, and never returned. She was the final victim to be discovered, found on April 24, 1989, in the woods along Interstate 195 in Marion. On September 4, 1988, 25-year-old Dawn Mendez was last seen leaving her apartment in New Bedford to attend a family christening. Her mostly skeletal remains were discovered on November 29, 1988, on the westbound Reed Road ramp off Interstate 195 by a sniffer dog. The investigation into these slayings was extensive, involving local and state law enforcement agencies. Several suspects were considered, including local attorney Kenneth Ponte, who had represented some of the victims in legal matters. Ponte was indicted for the slaying of one victim, 28-year-old Rochelle Doparala, but the charges were later dropped due to insufficient evidence. Another potential suspect, Anthony DeGrazia, was arrested for a variety of SA activities in the area. While he was out on bail, the authorities stated that he was the prime suspect in the New Bedford slayings. As a result of this, he was either slain, potentially by a loved one of the women, or taken out by his own hand. Notably, the authorities later retracted the statement that he was the quote-unquote prime suspect in this case. Perhaps the most intriguing theory revolves around a European serial perpetrator known as the Lisbon Ripper. Between 1992 and 1993, 3 women in Lisbon were found slain, their bodies bearing signs of vicious attacks. Speculation about a possible connection emerged because both cases involved victims of Portuguese ancestry. Some theorists propose that the Lisbon Ripper and the New Bedford highway killer could be the same individual, supported by the timeline and the supposedly eerily similar victim profiles. Automatic writing, also known as psychography, is the process of writing without conscious intention, often attributed to spiritual or subconscious influences. Practitioners claim that during automatic writing, their hand moves involuntarily, producing text that originates from the subconscious mind or external entities. Historically, automatic writing has roots in various cultural and spiritual practices. In Chinese folk religion, a form known as fuji involves using a suspended sieve or tray to guide a stick that wrote characters, believed to be messages from deities or spirits. In the West, the practice gained prominence during the 19th century with the rise of spiritualism, where mediums claim to channel messages from the deceased through automatic writing. Psychologists have studied automatic writing to understand its origins and implications. Some suggest it results from the ideomotor effect, where individuals make motions unconsciously. Others view it as a manifestation of dissociative states, where the person's consciousness is divided, allowing hidden aspects of the psyche to emerge. In contemporary times, automatic writing is often used as a therapeutic tool to explore the subconscious mind. From an occult perspective, automatic writing is viewed as a profound method of accessing wisdom beyond ordinary conscious awareness. Practitioners often describe the process as a gateway to spiritual guidance or a connection with energies, spirits, or even higher realms of consciousness. They argue that the messages received through automatic writing often carry insights or knowledge that surpass the writer's usual understanding, suggesting an external or deeper internal source. Many believe the practice serves as a direct line to the subconscious mind, enabling individuals to bypass rational filters and tap into buried thoughts, emotions, or even latent creativity. For others, automatic writing is seen as a form of divine communication, where entities such as guides, angels, or ancestors transmit guidance or answers to pressing questions. Proponents also highlight the therapeutic benefits, claiming it facilitates emotional release and fosters self-discovery. Some report feelings of clarity, purpose, or spiritual connection after sessions, emphasizing the transformative power of the experience. However, critics argue that automatic writing lacks empirical evidence and is susceptible to the writer's biases and expectations. They further point out that the content produced often reflects the individual's knowledge and experiences, casting doubt on claims of external influence. In June 2013, the serene expanse of Washington's Gifford-Pinchot National Forest became the backdrop for the perplexing disappearance of 19-year-old Maureen Kelly. Born on September 26, 1993, Maureen Kelly was a resident of Vancouver, Washington. Known affectionately as Anu to her friends, she was described as a laid-back, carefree, and affectionate individual. An aspiring singer and songwriter, Kelly often shared videos of herself playing the ukulele and beatboxing on her YouTube channel. Her last upload appeared just 2 days before her disappearance. On June 9, 2013, Kelly joined a group of friends at the Canyon Creek campground within the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. Around 5 p.m., she informed her companions that she intended to embark on a spiritual quest, a journey she had reportedly contemplated for some time. In preparation, Kelly removed all her clothing and footwear, retaining only a fanny pack containing a knife, matches, and a compass. She assured her friends she would return by midnight. When Kelly failed to return as promised, her friends reported her missing in the early hours of June 10th. The local sheriff's office promptly initiated a search operation, deploying ground teams and K-9 units. Searchers discovered bare footprints matching Kelly's foot size, indicating she had crossed Canyon Creek and proceeded north toward Forest Service Road 54. However, the trail went cold beyond this point, and sniffer dogs were unable to pick up her scent further. The search faced significant challenges due to the area's rugged terrain, characterized by dense forests and steep inclines. Adverse weather conditions further hampered the search efforts. While the day had been mild, nighttime temperatures dropped into the mid-40s Fahrenheit, raising concerns about hypothermia, especially given Kelly's lack of clothing. Despite extensive efforts, including aerial searches when weather permitted, no trace of Kelly was found. Several theories have emerged regarding Kelly's disappearance. One prevalent hypothesis suggests that she may have succumbed to the elements, with hypothermia being a likely cause given the low temperatures and her state of undress. Another theory posits that she might have encountered wildlife indigenous to the area, such as bears or cougars, though no evidence has been found to support this. As usual with disappearances such as this, there's also always some people who speculate that Kelly may have intentionally disappeared to start a new life off the grid. However, her family and friends consider this highly unlikely, citing her close relationships and lack of any preparatory actions whatsoever. In August 2024, human remains were discovered in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, near the area where Kelly disappeared. Authorities have indicated that the remains could potentially belong to Kelly or another hiker who went missing in 2013. As of now, forensic analyses are underway to confirm the identity, and no official determination has been made. I hope to have an update on this case in a future episode in this series. Hey everyone, it's your boy Jimmy here with a quick shout out to all my subscribers, patrons, and YouTube members. Love you all. Now let's get back to business. Rosicrucianism, a mystical and esoteric tradition, emerged in early 17th century Europe. It first gained prominence with the publication of three manifestos: the Fama Fraternitatis in 1614, the Confessio Fraternitatis in 1615, and the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz in 1617. These texts introduced the mythical Christian Rosenkreutz, depicted as a German nobleman who traveled extensively in the Middle East. During his travels, he acquired profound knowledge in alchemy, mysticism, and esoteric traditions. Upon returning to Europe, he allegedly established the Fraternity of the Rose Cross to disseminate this wisdom. The Fama Fraternitatis describes Rosenkreutz's journey and his intention to reform the world through the secret fraternity. It portrays the brotherhood as a group of enlightened individuals possessing advanced scientific and spiritual knowledge. The Confessio Fraternitatis elaborates on these ideas, presenting the movement as a call for universal enlightenment and the renewal of human knowledge. The third manifesto, The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz, is an allegorical tale steeped in alchemical symbolism, portraying a mystical initiation process in the Middle East. The anonymity of these manifestos fueled speculation about their authorship. Many scholars believe they were the work of Johann Valentin Andrea, a German Lutheran theologian, though this remains contested. This is largely due to the fact that Andrea himself, in his autobiography, claimed that he wrote the books. However, some true believers ascribe the works to Count Saint-Germain, who they also believe may have been Christian Rosenkreutz himself. At its core, the movement blends Christian mysticism with elements of Hermeticism, Kabbalah, and alchemy. The central symbol of the Rose Cross represents the union of spiritual and material realms, encapsulating the movement's belief in the interconnectedness of science, religion, and art. The Rosicrucian manifestos emphasize the pursuit of esoteric knowledge to uncover the hidden principles governing nature and the divine. They advocate for personal enlightenment through meditation, study, and a mystical understanding of the universe. Central to Rosicrucian philosophy is the idea of universal reformation, a concept that seeks to harmonize humanity with divine laws through scientific and spiritual advancements. Alchemy, a key aspect of Rosicrucian thought, serves as both a literal and symbolic practice. While alchemists sought to transform base metals into gold, Rosicrucians viewed this process as a metaphor for spiritual transformation, emphasizing the purification of the soul. And of course, I should say that this idea that alchemy was about a spiritual journey as much as a chemical journey was well established in certain alchemical circles as well. The rise of Rosicrucianism coincided with significant intellectual and cultural shifts in Europe. The Scientific Revolution, Protestant Reformation, and Renaissance humanism provided fertile ground for esoteric movements. Rosicrucian ideals resonated with those seeking an alternative to dogmatic religious and scholarly traditions that had predominated prior. During this period, Europe witnessed a surge in interest in occult-based proto-sciences, such as astrology, alchemy, and mineralogy. The Catholic Church and other authorities viewed Rosicrucianism with suspicion, associating it with heretical ideas and secretive practices. The manifestos call for reformation, and their critique of established institutions further fueled these concerns. Its ideas influenced numerous secret societies and philosophical movements, particularly during the 18th and 19th centuries. The Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia, founded in 1865, restricted membership to Master Masons, reflecting the intertwined histories of Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry. This organization sought to study and preserve Rosicrucian traditions, adapting them to a Masonic framework. This has, of course, led to numerous theories about the impact of Rosicrucian groups on world affairs. Rosicrucianism has faced skepticism and controversy since its inception. Critics have strongly questioned the authenticity of its claims, particularly the existence of Christian Rosenkreuz and the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross. Some historians view the Rosicrucian manifestos as satirical works or allegorical critiques of contemporary society, rather than literal accounts. Nevertheless, this group continues to play an outsized role in both the world of the occult and shadowy secret organizations.